Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about decoding the communication of narcissistic personalities. This is not just going to be about what narcissists mean when they say things, but about why communication is so difficult with narcissists in general. Pathologically narcissistic people have a lot of problems with communication. Not only are they dishonest, not only are they manipulative, but they have a lot of difficulty with perception, processing, cognition. Today we're going to talk about 25 or 30 issues. Yes, I said 25 or 30 issues that narcissistic people often have with basic communication. This isn't all of the issues that there are, of course, but we will address some of the most common and destructive ones. This isn't even about higher levels of communication, by the way, just basic communication between human beings. Please note before we begin, these problems are not all specific to just narcissistic personalities at all, and this video is not one of the hundreds of videos that attempts to list endless criteria for determining whether someone is a narcissist or not. This video is about how and why these communication difficulties show up for narcissists specifically. It is not a commentary on the difficulties themselves. It is not saying that only narcissists have these difficulties, because that is not true. And it is not giving a list of criteria for anything. This is a much more nuanced discussion than that. And the focus is on how these things show up for narcissistic personalities, not that these are things that only narcissists have or only narcissists do. Narcissists are human beings, and they often have similar problems to what many other people have, though these things may show up differently, be expressed or dealt with differently, or exist for different reasons. Many times, narcissists create the same difficulties in the people they mistreat that they themselves have. They also often have the same wounds as other people, which is one of the reasons that, for example, attraction can develop in romantic relationships. The growing inability to understand that causes a lot of confusion and upset for people that's really not necessary. It's kind of like saying narcissists eat food, and then everyone who eats food says, "Oh my gosh, I eat food too." Does that mean that I'm a narcissist? The answer is no, of course not. We are discussing concepts regarding the mechanics of eating for narcissistic personalities, not claiming that everyone who eats is a narcissist. That would not only be false, but it would be silly. So hopefully that is understood. Communication is very important. Without communication, we have no way to get our needs, wants, feelings, or issues across to other people. We have no way to get what we need. We have no way for other people to tell us what they need. From the time that we are babies, we're communicating with other people, and they're communicating with us. As we grow and mature, we learn to communicate better. We learn to use words, to read body language, to interpret tone, to examine facial expressions, to use context to inform meaning. We learn about how we come across to other people. We learn about how to state things in a way that best facilitates understanding, and much, much more. We learn to understand the full spectrum of communication and how to utilize that. There are many, many areas where this understanding can break down, however, and when it does, there are problems. Narcissists often have major problems in many areas of the spectrum of communication, which can make dealing with them very difficult. A vast majority of the problems people have with narcissists are actually due to the narcissistic personality's inability to communicate and or fall under the umbrella of communication in some way. For example, their style of communication. Despite their very deserved reputation for being rude and combative, many narcissistic personalities have a passive style of communication. That means they often don't speak or respond directly. So, for instance, instead of asking for something directly, they might hint around or phrase it as a statement. Instead of saying, "Can you please take me to the store?" they might say, "I need to get groceries." If someone doesn't realize that this is the communication style, they probably won't respond by offering a ride. This in turn often upsets the narcissist, who assumes that the person knew what they were asking for and just doesn't care or is refusing to give it to them. When confronted, the person understandably says that they didn't know the narcissist was asking for a ride because the narcissist didn't actually ask for a ride, which only makes the narcissistic person angrier. This also comes off as very entitled, and we will address some of the possible reasons for that a little later in the show. Passive communication is a way of communicating where the person does not say what they really want, how they really feel, or what they really need. If directly asked these things, they may lie or deny even when it's obvious. For example, someone who is stomping around the house and slamming on the doors might say everything is fine when they're asked if they're okay. Their tone, facial expression, and behavior are communicating that they're upset and angry, but they're denying it. This is confusing for people and frustrating for the passive communicator who feels that nobody cares. Narcissists in particular react badly to feeling neglected, rejected, left out, or abandoned, which often leads to outbursts, silent treatments, tantrums, and passive-aggressive attacks like smearing other people. The people who are being punished for their failure to read the narcissist's mind often ask why the narcissist didn't just ask for what they wanted, and to people's endless frustration, the narcissist replies that they did. This is an impossible way to try to communicate, and it's made worse by the fact that narcissists appear to assume that everyone communicates in this same passive, indirect way. They live in a world where no one says what they really mean or how they really feel, where everyone is hiding everything from everyone else. They don't believe you when you try to explain that you really did not understand what they wanted. This is partly because they're egocentric, which means they believe they are the center of everything. Egocentric personalities tend to assume that everyone knows what they mean, what they're doing or going to do, what they're saying or going to say, how they feel or are going to feel, and what they want or will want. When they run into difficulties with these assumptions, and they always do because these things are not actually true, they don't adjust their thinking. They just assume that people know but are pretending not to understand, or that people are consciously refusing to give them what they want but they just won't admit it. This egocentricity does not allow for them to seriously consider that someone really didn't know. They can't conceive of a reality where they're not the top thing on everybody's mind, legitimately the only thing that matters. Because of this, the only conclusion egocentricity allows for is that other people did understand everything the narcissist never actually said, but are intentionally trying to make them feel bad or somehow screw them over. It's a no-win situation either way, because even if you do make them understand that you really didn't know what you were supposed to know, this is then often interpreted as meaning that you don't care about them, which you will also be punished for. As we explored in the episode of the show entitled Narcissists and Cognitive Distortions Jumping to Conclusions, these kinds of assumptions create huge problems with communication. We cannot read other people's minds, and they cannot read ours. However, narcissists often not only assume that you're supposed to read their mind, but that they can read yours. And many seem to believe they can see things in there that no one else can, including you. It's very common for narcissists to tell other people what that person is thinking, what that person is saying, how that person feels, what they're doing, what their motives are, and much, much more. And to argue with you when they're corrected. You say, "No, that is not how I feel. That's not what I think." And they say, "Yes, it is." This can go far beyond gaslighting or lying. They genuinely believe that they're correct. Here again, we see the almost shocking egocentrism of this personality, as well as the level of cognitive distortion. I know what you are thinking, feeling, doing, and saying about me better than you do. I see what you don't see or what you won't admit. Because there's such a strong negativity bias in narcissistic thinking, meaning that they give more importance to negative experiences than positive ones, because they engage in a cognitive distortion called disqualifying the positive, meaning that positive experiences are not just given less importance than negative ones, they are interpreted as negative or not even counted at all, and because narcissists project their own self-loathing and negativity onto other people but don't realize that, instead believing that they're reading the other person's mind and feeling the other person's feelings, their conclusion is that all of the things that you are thinking, feeling, doing, and saying about them are bad, and so are all of your motives. And of course you deny it. Anybody would. No one ever says what they really think or how they really feel, remember, especially if it's bad. We are all just manipulative liars in the narcissist world. Narcissists also often fall prey to a thinking error or a cognitive distortion called global labeling, which is where they take a word or an action that was valid in a specific situation and apply it globally, meaning to everything. This often comes across as similar to context blindness, because nothing else is considered except what was said or what happened, as if it happened in a vacuum or for no reason. Context doesn't matter and is not considered. If the thing was said or done even 10 years ago in a totally different context, a totally different situation, doesn't matter. It happened. It applies to now. It applies forever. This thinking is rigid and impenetrable. The egocentrism, cognitive distortions, and assumptions that everyone is being dishonest, these things alone are enough to create a wall that is essentially impossible to get past. Compounding this even more is the narcissistic personality's complete lack of trust in themselves or other people. They are paranoid, pathologically afraid of being tricked or fooled, and terrified of being manipulated and controlled, but they don't trust their own ability to protect themselves from this, likely in large part because they seem to have an impaired vetting system for determining what information is true or false. For instance, nonverbal communication plays a big part in helping humans decipher what somebody else is saying, what they're trying to say. Narcissists are notoriously bad at reading body language and facial expressions. People who routinely deal with them report this, and studies have repeatedly demonstrated that they read even neutral facial expressions as hostile, angry, or threatening. This may be related to the fact that many narcissists were raised by at least one narcissistic parent. And, as we see with virtually all narcissists, the parent's communication was likely passive or confusing. Their body language, facial expressions, tone, and other nonverbal communication would not have lined up with what they were saying. This would cause the child to be unable to understand or read these cues accurately, or at the very least to distrust these things and or their ability to read them. People never say what they really feel or really mean, right? This would leave an adult person with an impaired, untrustworthy system for trying to determine whether they should believe something or not. And it seems that most narcissists conclude that it's just safer to assume everybody's lying. That way, if someone is, they won't be caught off guard and they haven't been fooled. This way they can't be hurt. They don't seem to understand that this actually creates situations where people reject and abandon them because people get tired of being called liars and cheaters and abusers when they're not doing any of these things. They get tired of having to constantly tell another adult that they're on the same side, or being forced to jump hurdle after hurdle to prove that they're safe to trust, only for this to never actually happen. People give up and move on. Then the narcissist was right all along. No one really cares about anyone else, and especially not about them. Everyone is just a manipulative liar. Narcissists have a strong negativity bias, as we mentioned earlier, and it works in conjunction with disqualifying the positive, so they believe that they have evidence for all of the negative things that they believe as well. Things that are neutral or even kind and helpful are interpreted through their own jaded, negative, and extremely biased perception as things that are harmful or selfish or hurtful. After all, everyone is a selfish, harmful person just like they are. Their self-loathing dictates that they will never believe anybody cares about them anyway because they project that onto other people. So they have a system that is essentially set up to dismiss everything as just more evidence that other people are bad, unsafe, uncaring, and untrustworthy. Disqualifying the positive specifically works as a negative feedback loop to reinforce the belief that everyone's bad, unsafe, uncaring, and untrustworthy because narcissists cannot integrate, possibly can't even recognize positive experience that would contradict this negative feedback loop, which means there's no evidence to the contrary. Because of this, it's not uncommon for people to ask, if they distrust me so much, if they think I'm so horrible, if they think I hate them, if they think I'm trying to harm them, if they hate me, if they're doing all these things to me, why do they stay involved in these relationships at all? This is an understandable question, but it really misses the reality for these personalities. Why would they stay involved in a relationship, family, or situation with people they don't trust that they think are out to harm them? Because in their belief, there's no other kind. You look at it and say, if I thought that someone was so horrible in the same way that narcissists think I am, I'd find a relationship with someone that I could trust, who I didn't think was horrible and evil or stupid or foolish or whatever. These personalities can't do that. There's no one they trust, and they don't appear capable of taking the risk. The relationship is always the same for them no matter what. There's nobody better for them to have a relationship with, regardless of what they say, because they end up seeing everybody the same way. It always ends up the same for them because they don't trust anybody, and they very likely never will, not even themselves. Narcissists also have a very impaired ability to engage in reality testing that severely affects their ability to communicate. Reality testing is when you evaluate your reactions, thoughts, and conclusions against the facts of real life to see if they are accurate and appropriate. It's like a fact check. It is a way of helping the ego to distinguish between what's reality and what is a fear or a hope or a wish or a belief. The human ego in general can have trouble knowing the difference here, and it does sometimes need to be checked because of that. A really simple example of reality testing would be that your friend doesn't respond to your text as soon as they usually do, so you start thinking that they're mad at you or that they're upset with you. Engaging in reality testing helps you to evaluate the situation objectively so that you can see that you don't really have evidence for your conclusion, because there could be many reasons that your friend hasn't answered you yet, and the majority of them actually have nothing to do with you. Your conclusion was based on feelings, in this case fear, and not really facts. Because of that, you can see that you really don't have enough information to come to the conclusion that you came to, and that there are many other conclusions and interpretation of the facts that are possible, which means that your conclusion isn't something that you must accept as reality, since there is a legitimate possibility that it actually might not be. The pathologically narcissistic personality structure is not really set up to include that capability. Because of all the things we've discussed already so far and more, the ability of narcissists to test their conclusions against reality is impaired, extremely impaired in many cases. For example, you can accept that there are other reasons a person might do or not do something that have nothing to do with you. Their personality structure is not set up to truly understand this, and it appears to be very difficult for them to conceptualize that this is actually reality. They just don't see it, and telling them doesn't seem to land on them in any way. Similar to small children, narcissists are not really able to understand that other people have lives and motives and feelings and many other things that have nothing to do with them. When they are told this, they just don't believe it. In their perception, it's just not possible that this is true. People are lying. If you think about the first time you ever saw your teacher outside of school, or when you realized that your parents were actual people who have always had lives that don't revolve around or even include you, you'll probably remember feeling surprised or maybe even shocked that they existed outside of how they relate to you and your experiences with them. This is very similar to how narcissists appear to view other people. They don't appear to care about, consider, or even know that other people are actual people who live outside of the narcissist and the narcissist experiences with them. It's not something they are able to understand and consequently do not care about or consider in any way. This is part of what creates the impression that narcissists expect people to simply sit on the shelf like a doll or a toy until the narcissist is ready to play with them. It's also part of what creates the narcissist's egocentric belief that whatever they are thinking about or worried about or care about or whatever is also what is on everybody else's mind. At the very least, this creates a kind of selfish blindness to other people's perspectives and lives. At worst, it creates claims of sabotage and paranoid reactions when people were not aware of what the narcissist had planned or was hoping would happen and stuff like that. People who honestly explained that they were unaware of the narcissist's plans or expectations may be called liars or worse. Narcissistic personalities simply cannot conceive of the fact that anyone has anything in mind but them. Because of this, people often say that narcissists believe that they're gods. That may be how this sort of all-encompassing egocentric mindset is expressed and articulated and perceived by adult human beings, but it's actually very much like a baby, in that the baby is the god, quote unquote, of the household, and everything revolves around the baby and its needs. The baby is aware of its own self and own needs exclusively, and even these in only an abstract, totally experiential way, meaning they're not self-aware enough to realize they are a person or aware of their needs as things which are understood, but only through feeling them. For example, they're aware of their need for food through the discomfort of being hungry. In other words, babies don't think, I'm hungry, I need food, I better cry to let somebody know that. They cry from discomfort because their stomach is empty without being aware of why they are crying. Caregivers hear the crying, guess the baby's needs through trial and error or having information that the baby doesn't have, such as when was the last time the baby ate, and they address these needs, knowing what the baby needs for the baby, because the baby itself does not know. The baby is incapable of articulating or even knowing its own needs, but it also does not have to do these things. The caregiver knows and takes care of it. The baby therefore relies on and proceeds to take for granted the fact that the world will know what its needs are, that these not only will be addressed by other people, but that they have to be addressed by other people. They must be addressed by other people. And by extension, that its needs and self are as important to other people as they are to itself. Indeed, the baby has no ability to conceptualize that anything other than itself even exists in the same way or could have needs, even if these needs are tended to unreliably by neglectful or abusive caregivers. This reliance on people automatically knowing the baby's needs and addressing them still develops because it has to develop for survival. Narcissists do not appear to ever mature out of these assumptions. They don't appear to ever develop empathy or awareness and consideration for other people or things outside of themselves, and they don't appear to ever develop the awareness that they need to fulfill their own needs and or at least articulate things to other people, because people can no longer just know or guess what their needs are. All of these things are functions of development and maturity. Narcissists appear to still take for granted that everyone knows what they will need and just give it to them, which means if people don't do that, the narcissist assumes that people are being punitive and withholding on purpose. They assume everyone knows what they want or are expecting or trying to do, which means if people don't operate according to that, it has to be intentional. The narcissistic personality's ability to engage in reality testing is impaired because they're not in the same reality that other people are in at all. They're just not, and you can't force them to be in it. They don't see it, and proof doesn't sway them because they appear to be missing some fundamental pieces that would enable them to understand and internalize what the proof actually means. Another thing that develops with maturity is the understanding that you're not always right. You don't always necessarily have all the information, and reality doesn't always agree with how you feel or what you think. Again, this is just not something pathologically narcissistic personalities are set up to do. With no ability to reality test, a disproportionately strong negativity bias, massive toxic shame attached to being wrong, and an impaired ability to vet information for truthfulness, it doesn't appear to be realistic to expect narcissistic personalities to really even be able to entertain the possibility of being wrong. It's just too big of a risk. If you believe you're wrong, then you're weak, and you can be harmed by somebody who's just trying to convince you that you're wrong for some type of nefarious purpose. When you cannot trust in yourself and you have no ability to discern what is true or false, the only way you can trust other people is blindly, based on nothing. Simply take them at their word with no way to mitigate harm or protect yourself. This is not something these personalities are willing to do, and to be fair, most people wouldn't. The difference is most people don't have to do that because they have tools that narcissistic personalities don't have. Besides, the reality is, narcissists generally believe they have all the evidence in the world that they're correct anyway. Narcissistic personalities appear to be legitimately unaware of their own limitations, and because of that, they don't seem to realize there could be information they might not have or are not considering. They assume what they know is all there is to know, when in reality, they may be making decisions or coming to conclusions, jumping to conclusions based on very little information or even no information at all. Narcissists operate as if assumptions are knowledge, feelings are facts, and that what they infer into things is always representative of reality. Of course, none of these things are actually true, and the result is that many narcissists end up being told continuously that they're wrong, because they are wrong. When you jump to conclusions based on nothing, or you think you can read people's mind, or you insist that feelings are facts, you're going to be wrong a lot. Due to the shame attached to being wrong and the thinking errors such as projection, which cause them to interpret things that feel bad as always being the result of another person's deliberate intent to harm them, this is just more evidence that they shouldn't trust anybody because everybody's bad. In many ways, the narcissistic personality structure is very limited, very immature, and really can only do a few things very well at all. Imitate and mimic, deny, deflect, and defend against criticism or anything that could be hurtful and damaging to the personality structure, and seek out the supply of reflection and confirmation they need to keep themselves afloat. All of these things are required for the continued basic functioning of what is really a pretty fragile and limited primitive personality structure. These things can't just not be done. They're essential for survival. So most of the day-to-day functioning is taken up with doing them, and there really isn't that much room left for anything else like maturity and growth and conflicting ideas. There's no room for not knowing, and since not knowing is seen as a vulnerability, narcissists are not really capable of entertaining the possibility that they could be wrong. This creates a fear that must be addressed, and the way many narcissists address it is by doubling down and rejecting information that does not agree with their conclusions. This is another big and meaningful difference between narcissistic personalities and those who are not. You can seek outside perspectives without attempting, either unintentionally or not, to manipulate others into saying what you want to hear. For example, if you tell a friend about something that happened and you're seeking their feedback, you will likely be pretty honest about what happened because you actually are trying to test your reality and see if your conclusions make any sense. Narcissistic personalities may also seek outside perspectives, but they tend to relate events in a way that is designed to elicit the feedback that they're comfortable with hearing. They are usually not trying to genuinely test their reality because they honestly don't appear to believe they ever need to do that. Why would you need to do that when you're not ever wrong? Narcissists tend to seek information that will confirm or promote a narrative or a belief that they already have. If this narrative or belief is that they are a victim, for example, they will tell stories that make them appear to be one. This could include everything from unintentionally skewed perspectives to omitted details to conscious outright lies. If they hear feedback which does not confirm their narrative or their belief, it will be discarded or reinterpreted to fit the narrative. For example, if the narcissist narrative is that they are a victim in this situation and someone were to respond in a way that sounds as though they don't agree with that, the narcissistic personality may attempt to reconfirm the narrative to themselves by telling themselves that the person just doesn't understand, or perhaps that the villain in their story, whoever that is, has gotten to this person and recruited them over to the dark side against the narcissist. What does not happen is that the narcissist hears feedback that disagrees with their narrative and they consider the possibility that they're wrong. Not when it's something that is intrinsic to supporting the narrative of their identity, and the reality is that their identity is so unstable that they will use everything they can to create and to support it. Anything they like or that's related to them in some way can be used for this purpose. This is different from other people who use music taste, style, choice, and things like that to express their identity. Rather than using external things as the expression of an internal identity that exists independently of the things seem to be the identity and are not distinguishable or separate from it for narcissists. Narcissists appear to use external things to create and support an identity. They seem to attach their identity to these things rather than the other way around, and are often hypersensitive about them because of that. For example, some narcissists may interpret someone not liking music that they like as the person not liking them, or criticism of that music as some kind of attack on them, even though they did not write the music, perform the music, or have anything to do with the music at all other than listening to it. This can be a very confusing and bizarre experience for people who pretty reasonably don't understand how not liking a specific band or the style of a pair of shoes means they don't like the person listening to the band or wearing the shoes. And they don't usually get an explanation for it because the narcissist doesn't really have one. It's very likely they don't actually realize this is odd, or it's a problem that not everybody else has, therefore they don't believe other people don't understand it. You were definitely on purpose attacking and rejecting them by saying you didn't like that thing that they like. You just won't admit it because you're a giant liar and a bad person. See how easy that is? Besides, they're only reacting to how they feel, and they believe that feeling bad is always the result of someone doing something to make them feel bad. It never comes from inside them as far as they can see it. It's always the result of something someone did to them. Narcissists appear to have serious difficulty experiencing themselves except through the reactions and participations of other people. Therefore, the feedback they receive from others is extremely important. Because of this, and because they come to feel that the feedback and reflections of themselves that they receive from others is always negative eventually, no matter who it is, this makes communication extremely difficult. It often results in the projection, blame shifting, shame dumping, gaslighting, and more that these personalities are notorious for. All of the things we've discussed so far lay the groundwork for what we are going to talk about now. That was part 1 of Decoding Narcissistic Communication. Look for part 2, and as always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide, so if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars throughout the year, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running right now, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you're interested in joining our support group with multiple weekly meetings, access to exclusive content, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by betterhelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by betterhelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today we are going to do part 2 of decoding narcissistic communication. If you're not familiar with part 1, you're going to want to check that out. So let's get into it. All of the things we've discussed so far lay the groundwork for what we're going to talk about now. Due to all of the things that we've discussed and more, narcissists' most common experience seems to be that they're being attacked and insulted by other people, so they lash out. They believe other people are trying to offend them or hurt them. There's generally no such thing as an accident or a mistake for the pathologically narcissistic personality. How can there be an accident when you're the only thing anyone is ever thinking about or motivated by, and when you know that everyone is an evil person covering it up by being a lying manipulator who's pretending to be good? Oh, no, no, no. You don't get me that easily. It is all on purpose, and I'm not falling for it. These people are very paranoid because, as we've discussed, they have no trust in themselves or their ability to discern what's true or false, and because they believe everyone is just waiting for their moment to take advantage. They are constantly looking for things that are meant to offend, insult, attack, mock, reject, embarrass, or upset them, and of course they find these things because anything can be made to sound bad if you try hard enough. As hard as it is to see sometimes, narcissists appear to believe they're defending themselves when they attack other people. Though on the surface it makes no sense that we can figure out, they seem to believe they're reacting to some insult, offense, rejection, ridicule, or whatever that they believe has either already come or will come. It's often a preemptive strike, so that they're not caught off guard by the inevitable betrayal of their trust. No one can betray your trust if you just never trust anybody and you just constantly suspect that everyone's going to screw you over eventually, right? Why wait? Why experience the anxiety and the shock and the painful betrayal? Let's just avoid all that and get to the point we all know is coming anyway. That seems to be the crux of the situation here. I know you're going to betray me anyway, and I'm not going to let you. I'm going to stop you, either by betraying you first, because then I'm in control of what's going to happen anyway, or by suspecting every single thing you do so that I'm not caught off guard because I can't deal with the betrayal that I know is coming, and I can't handle the anxiety of just waiting for it. This is why we often see narcissists seeming to get angry when people don't betray them or don't mistreat them. It isn't really that they want you to do those things per se. It's that they know you will or that you already have, and they can't deal with the anxiety of waiting for it to materialize. It provokes rage in them. This is also what creates the impression that narcissists can't just be still and enjoy a peaceful moment. They don't know how to enjoy things because they're too afraid of being betrayed and feeling like a fool for believing in something that wasn't real. Many narcissists will even say things like that if you ask them. They cannot relax. They are too distrustful, too anxious, and seem to feel too incapable of protecting themselves. They can't tell what's real or not real, so they just assume that everything is fake and a lie. That way they don't have to guess, and they don't have to be afraid of being wrong. Remember, there's no such thing as a person you can trust for these people, and no one says what they really mean anyway, so it's not like you're risking missing out on a good relationship by assuming everybody is a liar and a phony. Just assume everyone is bad, and then you'll be safe. This is, of course, disastrous for communication. You can't talk to someone who automatically assumes that everything you say is a lie or it's not true somehow. You can't talk to someone who assumes that you're not saying what you really mean or that you're constantly trying to trick them somehow. This is one of the reasons narcissists have so much trouble listening. Part of it is that they are intentionally tuning you out because they don't believe you and they don't want to be fooled by you accidentally convincing them. And part of it is because they're dissociated and they're listening to their own thoughts instead. They are checked out of the conversation, literally. They are listening to something else and are legitimately not present for the things that you are saying. What they do hear, they interpret according to their biases and through multiple cognitive distortions, so they get it all wrong anyway. But even if they got it right, they have enormous difficulty integrating new information, so it wouldn't even matter. You've probably noticed that even when they appear to accept an explanation, nothing's really been corrected, because when the situation gets brought up again, and it will get brought up again, they're still saying the same wrong thing as if the explanation never happened. They cannot integrate what you're saying because they can't integrate new information, especially new and contradicting information. What they think is what sticks, and that's it. You can see this at work in the curious phenomenon of mimicry that occurs with many narcissists, where they repeat things they've heard but don't really understand. This often results in chronically misused words or phrases that are not receptive to correction, no matter how many times it happens. Even with something as simple as this, then, the updated information simply cannot be integrated into the system. It does not stick. You can imagine the difficulty there would be with things where something bigger is at stake. Part of the issue is that narcissists don't use logic or anything else to test reality. If things don't make sense, or they can't come up with a logical reason for someone's supposed motives or behaviors, which is not something they seem to spend much time evaluating at all, but which may be brought to their attention by other people, they appear to just assume that there's some angle they're not seeing, and therefore their conclusions are still not wrong. So if you say to them, "But why would somebody do that? That doesn't make any sense. Don't you see that this doesn't make any sense?" The narcissist may respond with something like, "Well, I don't know why people do things." Or the answer may be something that makes no sense, or some kind of blanket generalization like, "because they're a bad person," or "because they're just stupid." Again, see how easy that is? All of the deflection, denial, gaslighting, and other behaviors these personalities are known for are the result of a desperate attempt to preserve the very fragile fiction they are living in. They have to reject contradicting information, because contradicting information disrupts that fiction and threatens its very existence. This cannot be overstated, and it really, really needs to be understood. New and contradicting information threatens this person's reality, which is to say, it threatens their existence. In behaviors like deflection, denial, gaslighting, and all the other things, despite the horrific damage they can and do cause, what you are really seeing is an inept, childish, even primitive attempt to prevent that from happening. And that's obvious if you think about it. How mature and evolved a strategy is it to simply deny things you did or said right in front of other people and insist it just didn't happen, regardless of people having proof that it did? How grown up is it to make up crazy lies about people and spread them around? How adult is it really to basically engage in a more articulate, slightly more sophisticated version of, "I know you are, but what am I?" How grown is it to throw tantrums, break things, or even physically attack other people when you're upset or you don't get your way? These are childish, infantile, ridiculous things for an adult person to do. The very real danger that they present doesn't change that. The grotesque childishness of these things doesn't mitigate the damage that can be done by them at all, unfortunately. But when we can zoom out a little bit and look at them in their proper perspective, it really does show us what we're actually dealing with here in most of these situations. A sort of small, childish, and primitive personality who doesn't know how to communicate, relate to other people, or even function in life very well at all. Some are able to succeed in some things, sometimes beyond all reason or logic, by the way, because narcissism can actually be a benefit in some situations, but their personal lives are usually a shambles, and they are generally unhappy, unfulfilled, chronically angry people who feel perpetually powerless and for whom nothing is ever good enough. That's not a surprise, of course. If we look at their behavior and how they treat other people, their emotional landscape becomes pretty clear. People who are happy and well-adjusted don't routinely mistreat others. People who are happy and well-adjusted aren't habitually jealous, envious, cruel, afraid, distrustful, paranoid. They don't project all these things onto other people. They don't try to shame others or claim that others are trying to shame them. They don't have to gaslight people because it's too difficult to admit bad behavior or a mistake or to be wrong. They don't have to live in a reality that's different from actuality just to cope with life, right? But narcissists do all of those things, and anyone who has spent any time with them knows this to be a fact. Far from whatever they are pretending to be, the majority of narcissistic personalities are terrified, emotional people in complete denial of just about everything, who use inept, self-sabotaging, often abusive coping and defense strategies to navigate life. This doesn't make them not dangerous at all, in fact. The lack of maturity and development makes them more dangerous in many respects. But understanding it does help us not to sort of endow them with more power than they really have. This, in turn, helps us to see them as they really are, which means addressing these things is not as intimidating as it is whenever we see them through the lens that they have provided. Not the one they would like us to use, in which we are supposed to see them as perfect and flawless, but the one they actually gave us, through which we might see them as genius demons or all-powerful monsters and tyrants and whatever. That lens is true in its own way, but it's also false in its own way. The reality is actually very far from that in many ways. These are small, inept, and even gullible personalities who live in a fantasy world because just day-to-day reality is too hard and too scary for them. Again, that doesn't make narcissists less dangerous, far from, but it keeps us from building up or even mythologizing them, which is not only incorrect, but it makes recovery more difficult. Seeing them in their proper perspective also helps with decoding their communication. If you can remember that this is a person who is lacking empathy, who cannot consider other people, who cannot take responsibility for anything because it's too threatening, who is pathologically distrustful, pathologically defensive, who literally lives in a different reality than you do, who cannot deal with emotions from anybody in any way, including from themselves, who cannot listen to even the gentlest perceived criticism because their ego is too fragile and too easily damaged, then a lot of their behavior starts to make more sense, and so do their words, at least intellectually. Emotionally, it'll probably never really make sense, and that's going to have to be okay because it's not going to change. You are not the same as this type of personality, and you won't ever be. So there are some things you're just not going to be able to understand. Count that as a blessing. Many of the things that occur in communication with narcissists are baffling and can make even just basic talking very difficult. As we mentioned earlier, not only do they often intentionally and unintentionally misrepresent and misinterpret what other people are trying to say, they may also chronically misspeak or misrepresent what they themselves are trying to say, because words and phrases don't mean what the narcissist thinks they mean. Because they're egocentric and self-referential, they often take offense to or become upset about things that are not about them, but which they believe to be about them. They have difficulty connecting with their own emotions and feelings, so they project them outwards, then perceive them as being caused by other people or to be coming from someone else entirely. They deflect everything they perceive as even possibly critical or shaming, which is a lot. Many people don't realize how fragile these personalities really are. This results in conversations that go in circles and accomplish nothing, and were designed by default to be that way. They deny even meaningless or silly things, turning every little thing into a personal hill to die on. They defend against things that didn't happen or weren't said. They accuse, attack, and demean. They turn even simple mistakes into huge crimes that people can never live down. They gaslight and pretend things didn't happen, or did. They have no understanding of cause and effect as applied to their own actions or how they appear to other people. They have no empathy, no insight, no self-awareness, no intuition, and no ability to read the room, so they may say things that are artless, rude, inappropriate, or end up embarrassing themselves and then get mad at other people for that. They don't appear to understand or even perceive context at all, either for themselves or other people. They continuously tell other people what the other people mean, what they are saying, what they're doing, or what they're feeling, and refuse to hear otherwise, which destroys the conversation completely every single time. They don't listen, they ignore you, they give the silent treatment, they stonewall, they run away, they blame others for everything and attempt to shame them to alleviate their own anxiety and shame. They project their behaviors and bad quality onto other people and engage in campaigns of shaming and punishment due to their own self-loathing and self-hatred, or to deflect suspicion from themselves. They let nothing go. They give no benefit of the doubt. They insist things happen that didn't happen because they really think they did happen, which is different from gaslighting because it's not intentionally deceptive, even though the effect on other people's is the same. They are delusional. They are suspicious and believe anybody is capable of anything at all times. They are distrustful. They believe nothing you say. They lie because honesty means absolutely nothing to them at all, and because they believe everybody else is doing the same thing. They're manipulative because they feel powerless and need to control other people but can't communicate directly about what they need or what they want. They like tricking people and feeling powerful, like they got away with something. They are paranoid and always assume the worst. Those are just the most basic, common things that can happen with the majority of pathologically narcissistic personalities. There are even more still, all of them awful and damaging. If it has not been made clear to you by now, due to things both in their control and things out of their control, pathologically narcissistic personalities are simply not capable of communicating on any real level in any kind of relationship. They don't seem to understand or even hear much of what's being said to them by anybody, much less someone they feel threatened by, and anyone who is more than a casual acquaintance fits that description. If all you're interested in is the most superficial, banal, and empty conversation possible with a person who has no curiosity, no empathy, and no genuine interest in anything but themselves, then it could be somewhat okay, though you'll probably still find yourself misunderstood continuously, as well as being unable to understand some of the things this person is trying to say to you, and you can't ask questions about it because that's threatening to them. They seem to interpret that as prying, or to take any questioning of them or things they've said as a challenge to them, and as claiming that they're wrong somehow, rather than an honest attempt to understand. Since they don't seem to possess any real curiosity about other people, they don't understand people asking questions, quote, just because either. If you're asking about something, there must be a problem. You will also find yourself being intentionally mistreated anyway, regardless, because that's just how this goes. It's part of the package. Their problem is internal, but they don't realize that, so the blame and punishment for how they feel goes to the person they can blame, often whoever happens to have the bad luck to be around the most. But if you could overlook all of these things or somehow didn't care about them happening, the communication might go a little better, at least sometimes, if you were willing to be simply a waiting receptacle for their various words and not much else, in other words. However, if you want to have real conversations of any level or depth, if you want to be able to ask questions and have your curiosity rewarded instead of punished, if you want to be able to say good morning to someone without having to worry that they're going to take it wrong, if you want to be heard, if you want honesty, if you want to be seen for who you are, if you want to be believed about anything you say, if you want to understand and be understood, if you want to be able to say what you think, how you feel, and what you mean instead of having somebody tell you, if you want to ever be able to resolve anything that ever happens, and if you ever want to matter, this is not going to work out for you. You might have noticed that this podcast does not include any lists of common phrases and what they might mean or anything like that. The reason for this is because the ability of these personalities to communicate can be so poor that the things they say could literally mean anything or nothing. There is no way to know if they even understand the definition of the words they are using, if they're using them the way that other people use them, if they're being honest, if they're being manipulative, if they genuinely don't remember or understand, or anything else. If you were to ask the narcissist in your life what they mean by what they are saying instead of assuming it means what most people would mean, always remembering that questioning them can be perceived as threatening, you might find out that what you've been assuming and therefore responding to is actually totally wrong. Or that the meanings of things change based on factors that you are unaware of or can't follow, or any number of other things that are not predictable or decipherable. Though it's popular to do, and in very general terms is helpful to understand that they're projecting, for example, it is simply too difficult to even guess what any narcissist might mean by anything without a lot of other information. You would get more illuminating information by asking them directly, though you might not necessarily get an answer. Whatever they might say would probably tell you more about what's going on with this person than any list you might find. Of course, there would probably also be a huge problem if you ask, and the reality is, it's not worth it, not when it won't change anything. The point of understanding how pathologically narcissistic personalities function is not to fix or enable relationships with narcissistic personalities. The relationship will be what it is whether you understand what's happening or not, because the narcissist is basically in it by themselves, and so are you, and you're both in totally different relationships. Regardless of what they say, these personalities are not really looking for understanding in any way, either of you or for themselves or for the situation or anything else. That concept has no true value or meaning to them at all. And I hope this episode of the show has helped you to understand why that is. The point of what we're doing here is to help you interpret what's going on so that you can make an informed decision about whether you want to continue to invest in this situation or not. The level of dysfunction here really isn't surmountable. Virtually every single aspect of communication is impaired for these personalities, from verbal to nonverbal, from listening to getting their own point across, from trust to honesty, down to basic understanding of words and what words mean. It is simply not possible to have a relationship of any kind under these circumstances. If you choose to do so anyway, and many people do, at least know what you're dealing with so that you're not blaming yourself. You will get enough blame from the narcissist. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, and seminars throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. If you're interested in joining our support group with weekly support meetings, access to exclusive content, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about communication difficulties with narcissists. There are a few episodes of the show about this, and each of them cover something a little different because communication with narcissists is so complicated and difficult. This one is about something that a lot of people are dealing with, even though many of them don't realize it. One of the things it can take people several years to figure out, if they ever realize it at all, since it can be so subtle, is that even though a narcissist may be using the same words and phrases that they are, or saying things that make sense in the context that they're being used in, the narcissist may not actually mean the same things you or anyone else means when they use those words or phrases. They may not even really understand or care what these things mean at all. They're simply using them because this is where they go. It's important to make it clear that we're not talking about love languages or anything metaphorical here. We're talking about actual words and their meanings. It might seem odd that people would use words they don't really understand, but narcissists are mimics. It's how they've learned to survive. It's kind of like learning to sing a song in another language. You can learn how to say the words and sing the song without ever understanding or even knowing what they mean. You're simply mimicking the singer. This is what many pathologically narcissistic people are doing as well. It's not unlike the way that children learn to speak. They imitate sounds and words with no idea what they mean, which is why they often repeat cuss words and swearing. They don't know it's a bad word. They're just repeating what they've heard. Narcissistic adults are not children, of course, and what we find is that many of them may believe they know what these words and phrases mean, but in fact do not, or that their definition of them is different from what most people understand it to be. It may be extremely difficult for them to relate the definition of words or the context in which they're being used. For example, it's not uncommon for narcissistic people who are pressed to define a word or a phrase to resort to looking it up in the dictionary or something similar instead of being able to answer. Or they may simply refuse to define it at all. This usually happens because their argument or their behavior points to the fact that their definitions of things must be different or possibly wrong, and people begin to ask them what these things mean to them. Because they can't answer, they will often use one of their patented defense mechanisms: deflect, deny, or detonate. Because they are so good at mimicry, it can be quite a while before a person would realize that the narcissist is either using words they don't actually understand, or that they mean something by the words that is different from how they, the listener, is understanding them. If a narcissist is very intelligent or they're higher functioning, this can be hard to see even for years because they've learned to compensate, manipulate, and hide things better. A narcissist, for example, may use words like respect, love, trust, accountability, and responsibility, but be unable to define them, explain the context in which they're being used, or explain how they would apply in a given situation. These are not the only types of words or phrases that they may be using wrong or without understanding. It really can be anything from literary quotes to platitudes to just everyday words. But these kind of things are very commonly on the list. This lack of a common definition creates large problems in any relationship. When someone does not even know what they're asking for, how will they know when they get it? How can they give it to somebody else? The answer is they can't, even if they wanted to do so. This is even more confusing for the person who doesn't realize this is the problem. They believe that everybody is agreeing to the same thing. They don't realize that the truth is there was never any agreement at all because the understanding of the words being used is not the same. This is not to say narcissists are never deliberately misleading, of course, they absolutely are. But if the victim understood this simple fact, it could possibly save them years of disappointment and pain. The relationship with a narcissist, any relationship, whether it's parent and child, spousal, platonic, any other kind, is like someone who only speaks Spanish getting into a taxi where the driver only speaks Japanese and somehow expecting that they're going to get where they want to go. It's not going to happen because there's no way to communicate with the other person. It's just going to be a huge hassle that frustrates and upsets both people for no good reason because the situation is impossible from the beginning. In a very real way, narcissists do not speak the same language as most other people. It sounds the same, but upon careful consideration, what we find is that the words being used don't mean the same thing to both people. This can go on for a long time without being understood. Indeed, it may never be understood by either person in the relationship. Both people will end up believing that the other person has lied to or misled them. In practical terms, it doesn't really matter whether someone is lying or they just don't understand. Either way, the situation is unhealthy and it's not going to work out. It's extremely important to remember that in order to protect ourselves, we should not assume that someone feels, experiences, or understands things the same way that we do. We should not assume that just because someone says the same words that we say, they mean the same things by them because, narcissist or not, everybody's different. We want to guard against projecting our feelings, experiences, and anything else onto another person. This only leads to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. If someone says they feel, experience, or understand things the same way that we do, which is something narcissistic people often do to create the appearance of intimacy, we should be careful about accepting that at face value. Pay attention to any red flags that demonstrate that this is not really the case because they will be there if it isn't. And the most simple method of all, ask. Ask people what things mean to them. You might not get the truth if somebody's trying to fool you, but you will probably get a red flag. This could be in the form of a non-answer, a vague answer, a cliche answer, a deflection of the question back to you, a refusal to answer, a nonsensical answer that doesn't make any sense. And if you get a red flag when asking someone what things like love and respect mean to them, that's probably one you shouldn't ignore. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, via text, via email, over the phone, and through Skype for international clients. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the book an appointment tab to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops a few times a month and clinics a few times a year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running right now, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and thank you for joining us here on the littleshaman.com. You are listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing, ShamanSpiritCenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that virtually everyone deals with when dealing with narcissists, and that is that narcissists twist things. This is unfortunately extremely common, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. In communication, certain things have to happen. At the very, very least, we have to speak the same language as the person we're trying to communicate with, and we have to have an agreed upon reality that we are both communicating about. If we don't have at least these things, there can be no understanding, which means that there cannot be any actual communication between us. Communication is predicated on understanding. For example, I am talking to you now in a language that we all understand, using words that we all know and can process about an agreed upon subject that I outlined in the beginning of this episode and that you agreed to engage with when you clicked on the episode to listen to it. We can communicate. I can talk and you can listen and you can understand. If you would like to respond, you can, and I can understand you. If we run into confusion, we can ask clarifying questions and engage in further communication until we understand each other. That's communicating, and it's largely made possible by the existence of those two things that we first mentioned. We are speaking the same language, and we are communicating about an agreed upon reality. We're doing that because we are attempting to arrive at understanding of some kind. The goal of healthy communication is understanding. You are listening to this to gain understanding, and I am offering it for the same reason, to facilitate and foster understanding. You want to understand, I want to be understood. I want to understand, and you want to be understood. We both have the same goal. Any misunderstandings that might occur can therefore be resolved or worked through because we're both working toward the same goal. However, when you are dealing with pathologically narcissistic personalities, you do not have the same goal. You are not speaking the same language, and you do not have an agreed upon reality. Because of this, misunderstandings run rampant in interactions with narcissists, and they usually cannot be resolved. The narcissist will not allow it. This is often confusing for people because why wouldn't someone want a misunderstanding to be resolved? Furthermore, why is this person seemingly incapable of understanding that there even has been one? Why are they attacking me, calling me a liar, refusing to speak to me, or whatever other thing they're doing instead of just accepting my explanation of what I really meant? Why is this going like this? Why can't I stop it from happening? What is the problem? The problem is that narcissists operate from a place of extreme defensiveness. It's so extreme that it makes them incapable of critically evaluating information. On top of that, they don't trust themselves to do this anyway. They seem to have decided that if they can't find an absolutely foolproof way to be able to tell whether something is true or a lie, or whether something is dangerous or not, they will simply assume that everything is harmful and everything is a lie, no matter who is saying it or what else is going on. This way, they're never vulnerable to attack. They cannot be tricked or manipulated or made a fool of. They cannot be hurt. They think this protects them. It does not. What it actually does is make exactly what they were afraid of into reality. I'm afraid that you will lie to me, hurt me, or trick me somehow, and I cannot tolerate the shame attached to that, so I have decided that you actually are trying to do that all the time. This way, I can't be caught off guard. I am no better off than I was before, and I actually feel worse than I would if I looked at things logically and in context, but at least it didn't catch me off guard. It couldn't because I didn't give it a chance to surprise me. I expected it all the time, and that way I was ready for it. It surprises the other person, though, and of course it does. Most people do not deal with this level of distrust and irrationality on a regular basis. Many have never encountered it at all before they met this person. Even people who have dealt with very abusive human beings in the past are often not prepared for the experience of dealing with the pathologically narcissistic personality. It's like a cartoon, a caricature. How can a real human being behave this way, say these things, think these things? How can a person over the age of like 4 years old believe in such black and white characterizations of life and of other human beings? But narcissists do, and everything that happens is twisted to fit into this very narrow understanding. Ironically, this is one of the ways we can tell that so much of this is sincere. People often ask, how do they do that so fast? How do narcissists twist things so quickly? How can they think that fast? The answer is they don't. They are actually interpreting it that way. There's no need to reflect and calculate and come up with scenarios or ways to fit things together much of the time. They are reporting their experience in real time. In this situation, even calling it twisting is probably overstating what's actually happening. To say that they're twisting the narrative or the events in this particular context implies that this is something being done consciously, and in these specific situations, it's not. For narcissists, there are only two ways that a thing can be, and since they don't really believe in the goodness of other people, there's really only one. It's black or it's white. And for narcissists, it's almost always black. Again, they think assuming this protects them from being hurt and trying to convince them that this is not necessary is like trying to convince somebody that breathing is not necessary. It's a survival mechanism, and as far as they can see, it has worked very well for them. It has not, of course, but they only remember the times that this mindset appears to have been validated and therefore reinforced and protected them, even if they had to twist things in order for that to be true. They don't seem to realize that if you always expect something bad to happen, just based on the law of averages, you will eventually be right at some point. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Even a blind pig comes up with an acorn every once in a while. They also don't seem to realize that if you're looking for something, you will find it, even if you have to make it up to see it.
This is true of people, not just narcissists. Studies done on this phenomenon have shown that people who were asked to find all the blue dots in an exercise began finding them even when there actually weren't any. They expected there to be blue dots, so when there no longer were any blue dots, they saw dots as blue that were not blue. Or think about when you get a new red car and you start seeing red cars everywhere for a while. There aren't any more or less red cars than there were before you bought yours. You're just actively looking for them now. If you were also afraid of red cars or you thought they were dangerous, you very likely might identify some cars as red that others would not consider red. Why? Because you're hyper focused on that and you have to make sure that you didn't miss any, because if you do, you could be harmed. Expectation has a massive impact on perception. In many ways, we see what we expect to see. Our brains tend to look for and remember details and information that confirms our expectations. This is how cognitive biases are created, for example. When dealing with someone who is so disconnected from reality anyway, the impact of expectation on their perception is beyond massive. It may, in fact, be the single biggest factor of influence here. They expect you to be evil or stupid or cruel or whatever other negative thing, so they perceive that you actually are these things. They expect to be attacked, so they perceive that they actually are being attacked. This creates a negative feedback loop that just keeps reinforcing itself and becomes entrenched into the person's worldview. Each time their expectations are confirmed, whether through misinterpretation or through reality, it reinforces their belief system, leading to a cycle of more distrust and more hostility that can be extremely difficult to break. Fear also impacts perception enormously, and as you can probably guess, in much the same ways. Fear is a very powerful motivator, and it tends to color our perceptions more than other feelings because it's so strong and we react to it so intensely. If people are also afraid of something they are expecting, this can make their perceptions and their reactions much stronger and much more distorted. Not only might they see it anyway, whether it's there or not, but it can become what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is where a person behaves in such a way that creates the situation they're afraid of, such as expecting and being so afraid that a partner will leave them that they constantly accuse the partner of cheating or otherwise betraying and abandoning them when they haven't. So the partner exits the relationship because they're tired of not being trusted, tired of not being believed, and tired of being accused of things they didn't do. Or expecting and being so afraid someone's going to be angry at you that you behave in such a way toward them that they then become angry when initially they were not. This is related to something called projective identification, which is the process by which people not only project their fears, insecurities, and negative feelings onto others, they actually create them. Other examples of this could be someone hating themselves and expecting and fearing that others will hate them too, so they end up behaving in ways that cause people to hate them. Or someone who expects and fears being mistreated, so they act in ways that are designed to induce other people to do things that they then interpret as mistreatment, such as provoking other people until they lash out. So what does all of this mean? It means expectation plus fear is extremely powerful. It can create very distorted perception, can even cause things to happen. And this is in people who are not struggling with the same deficits as pathologically narcissistic people. For those who do have these deficits, the impact of expectation plus fear is magnified significantly. A narcissist's inability to process emotion and information accurately in the first place means they are even more susceptible to these distorted perceptions and seeing or even creating things that are not there. This can lead to a heightened sense of paranoia and a hypersensitivity to perceived slights, making interactions with them toxic, stressful, and absolutely fraught with misunderstandings, which are then impossible to resolve because this person does not trust or believe anything anybody says, and they can't tolerate being wrong on top of that. And this checks out. Narcissists expect the absolute worst to happen, and then they won't believe that it didn't. They are essentially attempting to force other people to act out the narcissist's fears, carry the narcissist's own negative feelings toward themselves so the narcissist does not have to do that. Understanding this helps to demystify narcissists and put their behavior in a better perspective. This is especially helpful in situations where they are twisting the narrative or the events on purpose. Because, yes, they do this out of ignorance, simply because that's the limited way in which they function, they also do it strategically. When you are a prisoner of needing to control what other people see and how they think of you, narrative control is extremely important. How can you control these things if you don't control the narrative? Things will be twisted strategically to fit into whatever the narcissist narrative is. This usually has to do with whatever idealized image of themselves that they are perpetrating. Very often, this is of themselves as a victim of some kind, but it can be anything. This idealized image, this false self, is the star of the show, and narcissists make the movie around the star. After all, if the star of the movie is a tough gunslinger, you don't make the movie about that guy being a circus clown. The backdrop has to reinforce, support, and help create the image. Otherwise, the movie, the illusion, doesn't work. It's not believable. Most importantly, it's not believable to the narcissist. So when something happens where they can't sincerely believe themselves to be their idealized false self, they will twist things until the things fit into that. People sometimes ask, how can they tell the difference between when this is being done on purpose and when it's being done out of ignorance? But the reality is that it doesn't matter. If someone thinks that there's some significant difference here, that's just what they think. The reality is that there's not. It isn't any safer or less dangerous to deal with someone who is constantly hurting you out of ignorance than if they're doing it strategically. It might make you feel better to know that, but it affects nothing in reality at all. In point of fact, if they are doing it out of ignorance, that's arguably more dangerous, not less. People get very caught up in trying to figure out which one is happening when and all this, but in reality, this is actually a complete waste of time because it really has no bearing on anything at all in practical application. None. If you look at this situation objectively, you will see that. It doesn't matter. It is a favorite fantasy of people that if someone's hurting them out of ignorance or otherwise not completely maliciously, that person can somehow be educated out of their ignorance and therefore out of their behavior. But this is not that kind of ignorance. This is ignorance born of inability, not lack of information. This person does not have the ability to be educated out of their lack of empathy. Their behaviors are not the result of never being told that they're harming other people, for example. These things are the result of not being able to understand that or care about it. And the reason they can't do these things is because they don't have the capability. You are not the first person to try to make them understand, and you will likely not be the last. It is what it is. It's important to know, too, that none of this excuses the behavior of narcissists. It provides context for understanding what's happening and why. It demystifies and helps put in perspective very confusing behavior from very confusing people. It does not excuse this behavior. Whether it's malicious or whether it's not, nothing excuses it. This person is a grown adult and they are capable of making choices that don't harm other people. If they choose not to do that, they are responsible for their behavior. If you are dealing with a narcissist and they're always twisting things, it really helps to remember what this behavior is actually about. It is a desperate attempt from a very limited person to make reality into something that they can actually deal with. It doesn't mean anything. It's nonsense. It's noise. The reality is, pathologically narcissistic people live in a fantasy world. They really do, in the most fundamental sense of that phrase. They twist things to fit into the fantasy, sometimes because they really think that's what happened, and sometimes because they need to make it appear that way for their own reasons. Either way, they cannot deal with life and reality as is. They don't have the ability to see it or the coping skills to deal with it if they could see it. The best they can do is pretend that it's not true. Pretend that it's something else. It is really, really important to understand how much of this is really happening here. This person does not inhabit the same reality that you do. They really do not. Their perception and interpretation of you, of life, of the world, of themselves, of everything is entirely different than yours. This is not an act in the sense that, oh, they're just pretending to see things differently. No, they really do. If things happen that don't fit into their worldview, these things are ignored or they are reinterpreted to fit. Even when they are intentionally and strategically, consciously twisting things, it's not really because of any true misrepresentation of facts or reality. It's because what's true is what people believe. That's it. This is hard for rational people grounded in reality to understand, but you're dealing with a person who is neither of those things. Facts and reality mean nothing to them. This is both much more complex and much simpler than most people realize. Your view of things is complicated by facts and reality and what really happened. Theirs isn't. Those things hold no sway over these personalities whatsoever. They are not considered important at all, as you have likely already found out. What's true is what people believe. That's why they have to control the narrative and what other people think of them. Whatever people believe about narcissists becomes true. And if it's negative, this stays true unless and until the narcissist can find or create some opposing counter-reflection. To put it very simply, it's like Tinkerbell. The belief of others brings narcissists to life and makes them real. This really cannot be overstated. It's not a metaphor, it's not hyperbole. It's the truth of the situation. And if you think about it, you will see that that's how it is. When someone lives in a fantasy, when they live in an alternate reality, belief in that alternate reality is literally the only thing that concretizes it in any way. It's the only driving force behind it. And sadly, narcissists not only live in a fantasy, they are one. And it is only belief in this that makes them real. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, on Zoom and Skype for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, seminars, and more throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books out for publication, so if you are interested in picking up a copy, you can do that on littleshaman.org or on amazon.com. And if you are interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast here on thelittleshaman.com, brought to you by Transrelational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to the Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that many people deal with regarding narcissistic relationships, and that is when narcissists seem to want you to follow a script. During most conversations you will have with other people, everyone listens to each other and decides what they're going to say after they hear what the other person has said. Most people don't already have a script in mind of what they think people are going to say, and then either expect people to follow that or just simply go along in the conversation as if they did follow it. However, many people encounter exactly this when speaking with narcissistic personalities. Particularly when they're upset, pathologically narcissistic personalities seem to have not just an idea of how the interaction will go, but an exact script of what the other person will or should think, say, and do. If you deviate from that, if you insist that the role they have created for you is not who you are, they may become very upset. They may accuse you of lying or playing word games, or they might simply continue speaking as if you said what they thought you would say, even when you didn't.
This is extremely frustrating for people. Not only is someone not listening to you and not understanding you, they believe you said something other than what you actually said. Worse, no amount of arguing, explaining, or proof will convince them that they've gotten it wrong. They will continually tell you what you said, what you meant, what you believe, what you thought, what you did, and no amount of evidence or anything else can change their mind. This happens because, first of all, they're not listening to you at all. Narcissistic people live very much inside their own heads, and what they believe happened is more important than what actually did happen. Because they live so much in their own heads that they're not actually present in the conversation, and because they may also dissociate when their emotions overwhelm them, there's a good chance they legitimately did not hear what you actually said, even if they were looking right at you. You may even be able to see in their eyes that they're not listening. If you deal with narcissists on any type of a regular basis, you're probably familiar with that look. They're not present in the conversation. They're listening to their own thoughts and dealing with their own emotions. What does this mean? If you've ever driven a really familiar route, like going to work or something, and you've been so caught up in your own thoughts that you didn't remember any of the details of driving there when you got there, you have some idea of what is going on with narcissistic people in these moments. The memory of your drive to work is not lost. It was never created because you weren't paying any attention at all. This may also be why narcissists will insist you said something when it was actually they who said it. They remember it being said, somebody said it, so it must have been you. For example, the narcissist says, "You want me to fail my big exam because you're jealous of me." You, of course, deny this as ridiculous and attempt to explain what's really going on. Later on, they insist that you told them you wanted them to fail their big exam. You respond that it was they who said that, not you. They accuse you of lying, of playing mind games, of refusing to admit the horrible things that you said. It's possible this is simply a lie on the narcissist's part to make you look like a villain, and they know very well that you didn't say it. It's also possible that they actually believe you did say it. They remember hearing it, so of course it was you who said it. Who else is it going to be? It's possible, too, that they know you didn't say the things they're accusing you of, but they believe this is how you really feel, or this is what you really think, so you might as well have said it. This is perhaps the most frustrating and damaging feature of this, because they are acknowledging you didn't actually say the thing, but they're insisting your meaning, your motive, or your intention are bad, so it doesn't even matter that you didn't say it. This is called an unfalsifiable hypothesis or an unfalsifiable narrative. That means they're saying something that can't be proven false, which means there's no way to argue with it. You can't prove you don't think or feel a certain way, or that you're not just lying and pretending to cover that up. This is the crux of a huge amount of the problems with many, many narcissistic personalities. They simply don't believe you, and they never will. You've also probably experienced narcissists responding as if you said things you didn't actually say. For example, you might say, "I would never do something like that. That's not who I am." And the narcissist replies, "Exactly. That's why you did this horrible thing, just to hurt me, because that's who you are." And you're like, wait, did you even hear what I just said? I just said I wouldn't do something like that. That's not who I am. And around and around and around this goes. They expect to hear you say certain things in this interaction, and when you don't, they just imagine that you did anyway. They are holding the entire conversation, their side and yours, by themselves. There's no room for you here. When narcissists are not already upset, the failure of other people to follow the script may cause them to become upset. You are supposed to respond to things they say and do a certain way, and when you don't, this causes problems. Maybe you were not excited enough about their new job, or you didn't say the exact right things to comfort them when they were upset. Maybe you didn't praise their accomplishments enough. Maybe you didn't answer a question the right way. Maybe you're supposed to have the same opinion about a topic that they have. Whatever it was, you didn't respond or react the way that they expected you to, and that's either evidence that something's wrong with you, or it's a lie, or it just plain didn't happen, and they go on with the conversation as if you did. This is, of course, childish and absurd. You are a human being with all of your own stuff. However, narcissists don't understand that or care. These are arrested, dysfunctional personalities who cannot accept or understand that other people are individuals separate from them. Trying to get through to someone like this is totally pointless. They don't have the tools to understand or to care that they don't understand. They don't even seem to have the ability to understand why any of this matters. To them, it doesn't. You will not be treated as a human being in these relationships because pathologically narcissistic people seem unable to understand what that even means. They see everyone as objects, including themselves. This is perhaps why they appear to be so afraid of being manipulated and controlled by other people. If they believe that humans are controllable objects, they themselves would be no exception to that. In the end, dealing with narcissists is like being a Barbie doll in a child's pretend game. They will direct the action, supply the lines, create the scenarios. They will control the entire thing. Your job is to be the inanimate object, the prop that they can experience whatever fantasy through, and that's it. You are the villain or the hero or the trophy or whatever role they've currently assigned you to in whatever momentary fiction they're playing out. If you deviate from that and dare to have your own opinions, beliefs, thoughts, actions, words, and things, they simply can't deal with that because they don't know what to do with a real person. That's not in the script. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can find that at littleshaman.org as well. And if you would like to join our support group, you can find that at littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by ShamanSpiritCenter.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that is very common in relationships of any kind with pathologically narcissistic people, and that is the fact that they don't listen. And sometimes they can even seem to be incapable of hearing you. You might notice that when you speak to a pathologically narcissistic person, though they seem to be listening and they're often even looking right at you, they then respond with something that has nothing to do with what you just said, or they only seem to hear one part of what you said and somehow manage to come to the exact wrong or opposite conclusion of your words. This is often a huge problem in these kind of relationships, and it is especially bad when the narcissistic person is upset. How upset they are often dictates how much they're able to listen, and if they're too upset, it may be totally useless to even bother talking to this person because they just cannot hear you. Many people think this is deliberate, and for some pathologically narcissistic people, it's probably true. But it also happens because their feelings are so overwhelming to them that that wave of emotion simply blocks everything else out. It can seem like they're changing the subject with their responses to you, or that they're ignoring you, and maybe they are. But often it seems that they're not even hearing you. After dealing with this for a while, you may even be able to recognize the look in their eyes when they're no longer listening to you. They seem to be listening to somebody else talking that only they can hear, and in a way they are. They're listening to the raving, screeching voice of their own feelings. For a pathologically narcissistic person, feelings are facts. Instead of being able to view their feelings objectively as temporary reactions that may or may not be logical, their feelings are interpreted as factual. In practical terms, this means they fit the facts to their feelings rather than reacting emotionally to the facts. To put that into perspective, most people don't get upset until something happens or is done to them. Narcissists are already upset, and because of that, they become convinced that something must have been done to them to cause those feelings. This happens partly because narcissistic people are so divorced and separated from their feelings through years of denying and avoiding them that they can experience their feelings as coming from somewhere outside themselves. This is why they'll say things like, "I know you hate me, I can feel it." And you're sitting there like, okay, well, you're not getting that from me because I don't hate you. That's their self-loathing, their own self-hatred that they feel. In other words, in these situations, they don't recognize that these feelings were already there and they're not even related to the situation at hand. They become triggered and offended or hurt so easily that the feelings they already feel break through at the slightest provocation, and then they blame the other person for causing them to feel the way they already felt but have been denying. For example, if you say, "Why didn't you wash the dishes?" the shame that the narcissistic person already feels breaks through their denial. This can cause them to lash out at you angrily in self-defense, accusing you of trying to hurt them, to make them feel bad, of demeaning or degrading them, or any number of other things, not because of what actually happened or what was actually said, but because of that shame that they're constantly carrying around. This can be very hurtful and stressful to a partner or a family member who in no way meant anything like that and certainly was not trying to be mean. And now there's no reasoning with the narcissist because they are far too upset. They will not listen to anything other than what their feelings are telling them. Proof doesn't matter, logic doesn't matter, nothing matters except for their feelings. It's like dealing with a little kid. In some ways, although I certainly understand why people feel this way, it's almost weird for me to hear narcissists described as these apex predators. These are some seriously fragile people. They can't live in reality. They can't face the truth. They live every single day playing pretend like a child. They feel hurt and offended and attacked by almost everything anybody says or does, sometimes even things that are complimentary or kind. And why? Because their feelings dictate their reality instead of the other way around, and they seem to have no way to recognize that this is a problem. Most people operate like, "You said something mean, therefore I'm upset and angry." Narcissists operate like, "I'm upset and angry, therefore you said something mean." It's backwards. Events, actions, and things that are said are interpreted through the lens of the narcissist's feelings. Because of this, events, actions, and motives will often be reframed to fit the narcissist's emotional narrative. Seen through the lens of this emotion, things that happen or that other people do and say often become much more sinister, suspicious, and personal to the narcissist than they actually are. This is one reason why people are often accused of having motives they don't have, or of saying and doing things that they did not say or do. This is also one of the big reasons it's impossible to reason with pathologically narcissistic people, especially when they're upset. They can't even really hear what you're trying to say, and even if they could, they're certainly not going to trust you over their own feelings, which override literally everything. Sometimes they can't even get what they are trying to say to come out right. Narcissistic people have immense difficulty communicating with any authenticity because everything coming in and going out has to go through that emotional filter. More than that, since their feelings are interpreted as factual, those feelings are considered evidence. This must be true because I feel it. The proof that you were intentionally trying to hurt me is that I feel hurt. The proof that you are tricking me is that I feel tricked. The proof that you are cheating is that I feel like I've been cheated on, and so on and so on and so on. There's no way to communicate in this situation because the premise of the conversation and the issue are illogical. It's you trying to talk this person out of their feelings they often had no logical basis for in the first place. Not only is that not possible, but it can make the narcissist feel as if you're trying to manipulate them. Narcissistic people have huge issues with trust. They don't even trust themselves, so they're generally in a constant battle between trying to determine what is safe and what is not safe. One moment they trust you more than themselves, so you're a safe place. The next moment they trust themselves more than you, so now you are not a safe place. In situations such as our example about the dishes, if they were to believe you over their own feelings, that makes them vulnerable to you and whatever evil things that you're probably going to do to them at some point, possibly, maybe, they're for sure. That can't be allowed to happen, and it won't be allowed to happen. Even tangible, physical proof does not matter to them in these situations. They are so worried about being tricked and about not being wrong that they can appear almost delusional. So you say, "Yes, but here's a video of what actually happened. Oh, you edited that to make me look bad or to make yourself look better." "Yes, but here's a picture of you doing this thing that you said you didn't do. You faked that to make me look like a liar." "Yes, but here's a message in your own words. You wrote that and sent it to yourself to frame me." There's no reasoning with this. It's illogical and it's ridiculous. The overwhelming emotions coupled with their fear of being vulnerable and taken advantage of, along with their pathological need to be right, or more precisely, not to be wrong, make communication with this kind of person impossible. You are not on a level playing field at all. Whether they realize how absurd their arguments can be is a difficult question. Some probably do, but they might feel they've gone too far with it to simply just give in, no matter how stupid it sounds. Others may be in the grip of whatever emotion they're feeling and just running off at the mouth without even really realizing what they're even saying. Some may believe that they're smarter than the person they're arguing with and can somehow make these ludicrous arguments work, while others may be making these nonsensical arguments because that's literally the only thing they have left to say. It doesn't really matter whether they know they're doing it or not, or why they're doing it or anything else. It isn't possible to communicate with someone who cannot or will not listen to you, and it doesn't really matter why. The naked truth is that even if you could make them hear you, they still wouldn't care. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via email, via text messenger, and through Skype. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops a few times a month. We have the Boundaries Workshop and the Shadow Workshop running right now. So if you're interested in learning more about that or signing up to participate, you can do that on littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about something that is unfortunately very, very common when you're dealing with narcissistic personalities, and that is that nothing can ever be resolved because narcissistic people are not listening. Communication with narcissists is impossible because narcissists are in an I'm right, you're wrong death struggle while you're trying to foster understanding and resolve situations in an adult relationship. You don't have the same goal. You never have. You never will. It's not going to work because they are incapable of seeing that you are not doing the same thing that they are doing. One of the biggest problems in these situations is that you assume both of you are coming from the same place. You're not. Narcissistic personalities often don't care about resolving the problem. They are much more invested in pretending there is no problem, especially if they are being told that the problem is them. Narcissistic personalities don't just want to be heard and understood the way that it is in most situations. They want to be vindicated. They want to be told that they're not wrong. Many claim, for example, that you're not listening or that you don't understand them if you don't agree with them. Pathologically narcissistic personalities are generally not interested in listening because what you have to say might be dangerous or threatening. These are very, very fragile personalities, regardless of how they come across. The slightest criticism or even suggestion that they're not perfect can wound them very, very deeply. Their defense against this usually includes just simply tuning out things that might be dangerous, which probably includes everything you are saying in an argument or a heated conversation. Their misperception of something you said may have even caused the argument. Even if what you're saying is not perceived as dangerous, it's just not as important as what they have to say. Dealing with these personalities is very frustrating because of these things. It's important to learn to accept when someone is demonstrating that they're not interested in working together and they're just not going to listen to you. There is no power on earth that can force someone to agree with you, believe you, or listen to you if they don't want to. You are not going to convince a narcissist that you or the relationship are safe enough for them to take criticism from you, or that your motivation for giving the criticism is anything other than bad. The fact that you are offering criticism in the first place is all the proof that they need. This is really, really important to understand. So many people in these relationships believe they will eventually be able to convince the narcissistic personality that they are safe enough and trustworthy enough for the narcissist to accept criticisms or corrections the way that people can do in a normal, healthy relationship. This is extremely unlikely. And this belief is based on a misunderstanding of how these personalities actually work. For pathologically narcissistic people, the fact that you're attempting to tell them that they are wrong in any way is proof that you are not safe and that you are not trustworthy. If you cared about them, you would never hurt them in that way. You would provide unconditional positive regard regardless of what they do. You would never point out a failure, a mistake, a wrongdoing. You would always be on their side. You would never shame them. Now, the fact that hurting them or shaming them was not your intention doesn't matter, mostly because it's not believed. If you were not intending to hurt or shame them, they would not feel hurt or they would not feel shame. Since that's how they feel, that was your intention, period. There's no arguing with that and no way to prove it's not true. You can't argue with someone's feelings. Doing so only makes them think that you're trying to manipulate them. Why else would you be trying to talk them out of their feelings? The truth is, this is a pathologically insecure personality who doesn't feel safe even inside their own minds or with their own feelings and doesn't even trust themselves. There is almost zero likelihood that they're going to ever feel safe with another person or be able to trust anybody. When someone cannot trust themselves, they're not going to be able to trust other people. The important thing is for you not to buy into their constant attempts to blame you for that. There's nothing you can do to make them feel safe because they just don't. They blame you because they believe it's your job to fix that. I would feel safe if you made me feel safe. Since I don't feel safe, this is obviously your fault. This is part of the narcissist's mistaken belief that they're not responsible for themselves, kind of like a child. It's not your responsibility to somehow convince a pathologically insecure, pathologically distrustful person to trust you. Not only is that not your responsibility, it's not even possible. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about how many narcissistic people tell on themselves. This is very, very common when dealing with narcissistic people, and there are a few ways they might do it, so I thought we would address that on the show today. Pathologically narcissistic people are known for being duplicitous or deceitful. They have a reputation for being fake or for hiding who they really are. This reputation is deserved. They do that. However, the majority of them, they're not very good at it. Little pieces and flashes of what they're hiding do show through, usually pretty early, and people do see these flashes. It's just that it's often something that is so opposite of what the narcissist is claiming to be that people will ignore it or rationalize it away, believing it to be out of character for the narcissist and convincing themselves that they're just overreacting. It's only over time that people realize this angry, demanding, needy, or unpleasant behavior is not out of character for this person at all, and in fact, it is their primary way of being. It's true that narcissistic people make a very deliberate attempt to present themselves a certain way to other people, and this is often not a reflection of how they really are at all. But most people do notice certain things that don't add up or don't jibe with the rest of the picture. For instance, someone might boast, even on a first date, how wonderfully they treated all of their exes, but they might also use derogatory language about these people or make inappropriate or off-color remarks about their exes throughout the night. These are things that don't really go with the whole Mr. or Mrs. Wonderful picture of themselves that they're trying to paint. This is one of the ways narcissistic people tell on themselves, by saying and or doing contradictory things. This should not be ignored, because if someone is doing that, it means at least one of the things they're saying is not true and may be an indication that the person is hiding something or that they have some type of perception problem. Another way pathologically narcissistic people may tell on themselves is by just blurting things out that have nothing to do with anything. When my kids were little, I remember that they were wrestling in the hallway, and I went over and I said, "What are you doing?" And my oldest daughter, who was 5 or 6 at the time, just blurted out, "I didn't cut her hair." So of course I'm like, "What?" So I look over at my youngest daughter, and all her hair has been cut off. Apparently they were playing beauty parlor before they started wrestling. This is similar to the way many narcissists behave. They simply blurt things out. It usually indicates something they've done wrong or feelings that they have for themselves. For example, an innocent question may provoke a very hostile reaction with the narcissist saying, "I'm not lying," even though they haven't been accused of anything. Of course, this makes many people suspicious, and it just turns into a bigger and bigger problem. It's like with my daughter. When I said, "What are you doing?" she blurted out the thing that she had done wrong, even though I didn't even know anything about it. Narcissists behave the same way a lot of times. A third way that a pathologically narcissistic person can tell on themselves is with projection. That is to say, they will accuse other people of what they are doing or what they are feeling. Projection is generally a core feature of any type of narcissism. It's very, very common. To the narcissist, their feelings are facts. If they feel that you are doing or feeling or thinking something, then that's a fact. That's what it is. There's no talking them out of it. There's no way to prove them wrong. That's a fact. When they are confronted by things they find uncomfortable or hard to deal with about themselves, such as feelings about themselves that are painful or things they know they shouldn't have done, they often deal with these things by projecting them onto other people. "I didn't do that, you did that. I don't feel that way, you feel that way." In this way, they avoid the feelings that accompany these things and deny the existence of them all in general. Denial is the narcissist's armor, and all of this is part and parcel of their overall denial problem. In the end, no matter how good narcissistic people may seem at hiding who they are, something always shows through, and people usually know pretty early on that something's not right. Make sure you trust your instincts here. If something doesn't add up, don't ignore it. What doesn't seem like a big deal now could be a really big deal later. That doesn't mean you have to make a big deal out of it. You might not choose to call the narcissist on it at all, and you don't have to. It might be better if you don't in some cases. But make note of it. Don't ignore it. Don't just rationalize it or push it away. The last thing the narcissist in your life needs is a partner in their denial. And remember, as always, the only way to cleanse your life of this craziness is to just stay away from it. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions. I take appointments online and over the phone Monday through Friday. So if you are looking to speak with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab, or you can use the link that's available down there in the information section of this video. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about something that is very, very common in narcissistic relationships, and that is the attempt to attain power positions. You know, after so many arguments with narcissists, you begin to realize that they haven't actually answered you or addressed any of the topics at hand. All they've done is deny, deflect, distract, avoid, explode, or run away. You're left kind of sitting there thinking, hey, wait a minute, you never answered me, or they didn't address this. After so many more arguments with a narcissist, you come to realize this is actually all they have ever done. They've never addressed the topic. They've never answered your question. After so many more arguments, you realize this is all they're ever going to do. Narcissists believe they are attaining a power position by not listening to you, by not considering your side, by being unreasonable. This is very important to understand because it's a big reason communication with them is not possible. It doesn't matter how they do it, whether it's deliberate, whether it's unconscious, if it's the silent treatment, ranting over you, condescending, screaming, physically attacking you to try to shut you up, turning things around on you, shaming you, walking away. It all means the same thing, and it all accomplishes the same goal. They don't want to hear what you're saying. Narcissistic people seem to legitimately believe that entertaining anything the other person is saying renders them vulnerable. They appear to view arguments and discussions about conflict or problems as the other person just trying to convince and manipulate them or trying to trick them. So they defend themselves and they believe they're holding a power position by refusing to listen no matter what. How far do you think you're going to get with someone who hears only attempts to manipulate and trick them, no matter what you say? How far do you think you're going to get with someone who legitimately believes that listening to other people is some kind of dangerous act that renders them weak, right? You're not going to get very far. And over time, you will see that. It's unfortunate, but these are fragile people and they are afraid a lot of the time. So they search for ways to control and be in a power position because they're afraid. For example, refusing to be pleased. An abuser in a relationship who refuses to be pleased is making a power play. They're trying to attain a power position. They won't accept any attempts to please them, but they keep insisting that the other person needs to try harder because it's that person's fault that they're unhappy. Then they keep saying that nothing is good enough and the other person is failing them. This is seen by them as a power position, such as with children who have just discovered saying no. They just say no about everything. Narcissistic people think this keeps them in a power position, but really they're just making themselves unhappy. Blaming other people for it might alleviate any of their shame triggered by being blamed or feeling responsible, but it doesn't help them be any happier, especially because people get tired of being treated that way and they exit the relationship. The torture of living through this type of relationship is not describable. It's unspeakable. But it's even more horrible in some ways because the abuser is also torturing themselves, and they're doing all of this for literally no reason. They're making everybody in the relationship or the situation totally miserable, including themselves, for nothing. It's just a never-ending cycle of misery. Excuse me. You know, the truth is, it is just not realistic to believe you can live happily ever after with a person who legitimately, genuinely believes being asked for respect and decency and to be listened to is somehow being controlled by the other person. If an adult person does not understand that they are required to listen and to show respect and decency in a relationship, it's not your job to teach them, and you're not going to be able to do that anyway. Your purpose in a relationship with a narcissist is to be used to regulate their emotions. It's not to be afforded respect and decency and as an equal partner and someone whose emotions and feelings and opinions and beliefs and thoughts deserve to be respected. Your job is as a tool. Your purpose is that they use you to help regulate themselves. That means, to help them to feel better, to put it very, very simply. Now, this doesn't just mean fixing their problems and propping them up when they need it. It also means that you are the target of the constant negative emotion and stress they continually purge because they can't process or hold on to it. They have to just keep trying to pump it out. They need a place to spew all of that. You are the receptacle for it. This makes you the psychological equivalent of a toilet. Just think about that. You are so much more than a receptacle for somebody's toxic self-hatred and psychological vomit. And I really, really hope that you understand and believe that. You deserve so much more. There's no way to explain to a pathologically narcissistic person so that they're going to actually understand that you are a human being with rights and feelings, or that this matters at all. They don't even understand themselves as human beings or what being a human being even means. Don't let any of that make you forget that you are one. Being in a relationship with someone who is pathologically narcissistic can make it easy to forget what real life with real people is like. Don't let that happen. There are people who will not punish you for being imperfect. There are people who will believe you when you say something. There are people who will get to know you and understand what you're actually like. There are people who can be reasoned with. There are people who understand that everybody makes mistakes. There are people who don't blame everybody else for every single thing. There are people who will actually talk things out. There are people who can actually communicate. There are people who will tell you what the problem is instead of insisting that you guess or that you should already know. There are people who will never pretend to misunderstand you. Not even once. They won't even do it one time. There are people who will ask you for your thoughts, your feelings, and your meanings instead of telling you what these things are. There are people who will not insist that you are evil and malicious or stupid and clumsy and ugly and whatever else horrible things that these people say. There are people who will actually listen to you. There are people who are not narcissists and who don't act like them. So don't forget that. Don't forget what real life with real people is like, because you are worth so much more than the narcissist in your life is able to give you. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. You have a beautiful day.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something I hear all the time, and that is listening to or believing the narcissist when they say something negative or insulting to you. This is something many people struggle with, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. It's interesting that when we talk to people about the narcissists in their lives, whether it's their mother or their father or their spouse or their friend or anybody else, it's almost always the same type of dynamic. This person knows the narcissist is unstable, insecure, unrealistic, mean, not truthful, and has a flexible relationship with the truth, to say the least. And yet they still seem to internalize the negative, cruel, or hurtful things the narcissist says to them. If you ask people if they would believe the narcissist claiming they have $1 million, they say no. If you ask people if they would believe the narcissist if they wanted to borrow $1 million but they'd pay it back, they again say no. They know this person cannot be trusted to be honest or to even know the truth and generally believe almost nothing they say. Almost. We often find that even when people know someone is not an honest person and or has unreliable perception, they will still often internalize the negative things said about them as if in this one specific area, the narcissist or other toxic person is somehow magically not only telling the truth, but also living in reality now. This is not the case. Everything they say has the same value as far as honesty and perception goes. Their insults and criticisms are just as overblown as their idealizations and vice versa. Now, this happens partly because people with a strong narcissistic pathology often hide behind personas created to manipulate others for survival. People incorrectly assume that if that persona or facade is not real, the opposite of it must be the truth or the reality of who this person is. Therefore, what they say and do during these times is true. This is understandable, but it's mistaken. Their honesty and perception are no more valid or unaffected during these times. The truth is, both the nice and the cruel side, and any other that you might see, are personas and masks in their own right. Both of these personas or sides of their personality were created to do the same thing, enable the narcissist to survive. For example, the anger and cruelty and abuse that you see are defensive, even when they don't appear to be. They come out when the narcissist perceives a threat. It may not be a threat that you can understand, but that doesn't matter. You not seeing or recognizing a threat anywhere has nothing to do with whether or not they think there is one. This person does not think like you do. They don't come to the same conclusions that you do. They just don't, and that's all there is to it.
They respond to emotions they don't understand, that they might not even be aware they're feeling, and many react immediately with guns blazing, ready to eliminate any threat. Others retreat completely, cutting off communication and even contact until they feel that the threat is gone. It is a primitive, childish defense mechanism created and perpetuated by their enormous emotional immaturity. It seems amazing that anyone could believe a person this unstable and immature about anything. Even when we don't understand the inner workings of why they behave the way that they do, the behavior speaks for itself. Almost all of the ways pathologically narcissistic people deal with conflict, both internal and external, are childish, and often so is much of their communication. Yet we hear it all the time. The question is, why? Why do these things become internalized? Why are they considered as true or even considered at all? Many times it's because the person already has deep-seated beliefs or fears of their own that the criticisms or insults have triggered. Many of these are the result of unconscious conditioning from childhood or from other relationships in the past. Children will not assume that the adults in their lives are wrong or mistaken or lying. They will assume that they themselves are the problem because they believe everything that happens is somehow related to or caused by they themselves. And because through necessity, children rely on adults as the unilateral, undisputed arbitrators of truth. This mindset can be carried into adulthood and results not just in having whatever negative beliefs about the self that were intentionally or otherwise installed during childhood. I'm not good enough, I don't matter, I'm not valuable, I'm not important, I'm not worthy, I'm responsible for other people, it's my responsibility alone to fix or manage this relationship and things like that. It also results in the idea that other people's opinions of us are automatically more valid or more important than our own. This is an outdated, unhealthy mindset in general, but it becomes truly dangerous when the person the opinion is coming from is unstable, unfair, unrealistic, abusive, dishonest. Narcissists are like little kids on the playground. They will keep throwing insults at somebody until something upsets them, and once they see, they will keep repeating it because it works. That's what kids do on the playground too. This is one reason controlling our own reactions to our emotions is so important. When you don't do that, you yourself are supplying them with the ammunition they are hitting you with. This is another reason it makes no sense to believe or internalize or even take personally the things that they say. They are not operating off of reality or facts in any way. They're operating solely off of your reaction. They don't care if it's true or not. They care that you care. Upsetting you makes them feel powerful and superior, exactly like the kids on the playground. Narcissists may or may not have any real understanding of what they're actually doing. A lack of empathy suggests they really don't have any true understanding, but it doesn't really matter since they don't care anyway because that's not the point. You are not the point. You are simply a tool being used in the endless endeavor to make themselves feel better. Any actual empathy they might have is canceled out by this fact regardless. So it really doesn't matter at all. If you find that you are in this situation where you have internalized or considered as fact or started to believe the things that this person has said to you, start really thinking logically about why you would listen to, believe, or even consider anything this person says or trust their perception in any way. Consider the source. Have they given you any reason to think they have sound judgment about you, that they're honest with you, that they can be objective or fair or reasonable toward you? Start exploring yourself and the reason that these things bother you so much that you would even entertain them coming from a person known to be unstable and dishonest. Stop automatically assuming that the other person or people involved are right or fine and that you're always the problem or that you're always the person required to fix, manage, and change relationships and situations. This mindset is left over from childhood. It was bogus then, it's bogus now. You can learn to practice looking at things in a more balanced, realistic way that's more fair to everyone, including yourself. Especially yourself. And one of the ways to start doing that is to really and truly understand that the things people do and say are a reflection of them, not you. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, via text, via messenger, via email, over the phone, and through Skype for worldwide clients. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab. The schedule does fill up fast. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something very important, and that is why you should listen to narcissists. I know, you're going to say, but Little Shaman, you always tell us not to listen to narcissists, that everything they say is crazy, projection, BS that isn't based in reality. That's true, and I still mean that. Believe me, I still mean that. But you probably should listen to the narcissists in your life to a certain degree, and this is what I mean by that. First, let's be sure we understand what is meant by listen. Listen in this context does not mean obey, does not mean take to heart about yourself, does not mean internalize, does not mean allow to define you or anything like that. That we still don't ever want to do. It just means listen in the sense of physically hearing what's being said and mentally comprehending what it means. When you start to do that, when you really start to do that, you are very likely going to hear some things that you really didn't hear before. When you listen to narcissists and you take the time to truly comprehend the things that they're saying, what you hear is how they really view things and what they really think. Not necessarily of you or anything else specifically in reality. That's always a crapshoot based on their moods and emotions in the moment and cannot ever really be taken seriously. What we're talking about more is how their mind works, their perception, how they view the world in general. And when you hear that, when you truly hear that, you will realize there's no hope of having any actual relationship with this person at all because the way they see things is so rigid and negative that it's completely hopeless. Narcissists, like everyone else in the world, will tell you how they really are and what they really think if you actually listen to them. It's true that they attempt to present themselves a certain way and things like that, but it's also true that the reality is right there in front of us the entire time. All we have to do is look. To see, one has only to look. To hear, one has only to listen. Dealing with narcissists is no different. One of the hardest things about doing this is trying to see past our own emotions and projections. A basic amount of projection is necessary for communication. We have to assume that others are coming from the same basic place that we are, that they mean the same basic things when using the same basic words and things like that. Where things get complicated is that this is not always true, so misunderstandings can happen. When we're dealing with pathologically narcissistic people, it isn't really safe to assume anything about what they're saying or what they mean, and if we really listen to what they say, we can see that. As we discussed in the episode of the show, Decoding Narcissistic Communication, narcissists often use words, idioms, and or expressions incorrectly. For example, their definition of words, particularly words that describe feelings, are often incorrect or are misconstrued. They might say things that make no sense or that seem out of context. There's also some bigger, more emotional projection that happens as well, and this is not only incorrect but often dangerous. The example we always use on this channel of this kind of projection is serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is considered by many people to be a sort of Lonely Hearts Club guy who killed people because he didn't want to be alone. This perception was created by Dahmer's own words. When asked why he killed people, he said it was because he didn't want them to leave him. When asked why he ate people, he said it was because he wanted them to be a part of him. People hearing these words from such a soft-spoken, awkward, basically normal-looking man assume that Dahmer means what they would mean by those words, and they attribute his motivations to loneliness. This causes them to view him as a sympathetic, even tragic figure who killed because he was so shy and lonely. However, the reality of the situation is very far from any of that, and these facts are known. It's not a secret. Dahmer's behavior toward his victims both before and after they were dead demonstrates his extreme lack of empathy, his extreme objectification of other people, his complete lack of interest in normal relationships with living, cognizant human beings demonstrates this as well. When taken in context with the reality of his actions, we can see very clearly that Dahmer's statements regarding his motivations are not statements of loneliness. They are statements of ownership. He didn't care if people had lives or families or dreams or needs or hopes or anything else. He just wanted them to stay there, and so he kept them like they were objects. He even used that phrasing several times. I wanted to keep them. His motive for eating his victims was actually sexual gratification, a thing that he freely admitted. It had nothing to do with anything else. People just project their own meaning onto his words based on their own emotions and experiences, not the reality of the situation. We see then the danger of projecting our own feelings and experiences onto other people, especially when their behavior contradicts our interpretation. As we discussed, these things about Dahmer are known. People still allow their own projections to color their perception of both him and his crimes. This is also something we see in less extreme situations all the time. Projection is the opposite of empathy, because empathy is seeing how other people feel, and projection is seeing how you feel. This can be dangerously misleading. When listening to other people talk, we need to be cognizant of how much we are filling in, how much projection we are engaging in. Too much is dangerous, especially if the facts of the situation conflict or even contradict what we think we're hearing. It's important to give the facts of the situation more weight than our interpretation of what someone says. This isn't always easy, but with practice we can learn to put our personal interpretations aside and just listen to what's being said. When you do that with Dahmer, for example, his words sound very, very different. It's also important to try to put our emotions aside. With narcissists, this is often extremely difficult. They typically communicate using emotional manipulation a lot of the time, so trying to hold your emotions in check and really listen can feel almost impossible. It's not, though, and if you can learn to do it, the reality of what you hear is very disheartening. You hear the depth of their distrust, their anger, their fear, their contempt for other people, their loathing for themselves. You hear their willingness to take advantage of other people, their absolute conviction that the world is a scary, dangerous, predatory place where people do nothing but try to get over on each other all the time. You hear their complete and total disbelief in things like genuine kindness, trust, love, reciprocity, fairness. You hear their hopelessness that anything could ever get better for anybody ever, especially themselves. Perhaps most importantly, in a practical sense, you hear their outright refusal to ever listen to anything anyone ever says to them. The disdain and disgust, the blatant contempt mingled with terror because of their absolute certainty that literally everyone is trying to manipulate, take advantage of, or screw them over somehow. Their outright refusal to be convinced of anything, to have anything proven to them, to be wrong about anything, even if it's harming them somehow to be wrong. No willingness to risk, to trust, to try anything. You hear their refusal to invest, the reality that they don't want to believe anything anybody says to them. You hear their absolute disregard for other people, their inability to even see other people. You hear their legitimate and fervent belief that they really are the only things that matter. You hear no hope for anything, no path forward or way through offered to anybody, no way to make anything better, no ability to change or grow or evolve at all. No belief, no faith in anything, no benefit of the doubt for anyone or anything, no ability to bend, no flexibility of any kind. It's all locked doors and dead ends. It is a broken record of negativity and hopelessness and refusal to do or see anything differently that just plays and plays and plays. There's no hope here of anything. And once again, this is not so much about the words that they say, though you can generally hear it there too. This is about their mindsets, how they look at things, how rigid their perceptions are, how fixed their beliefs, how little capability they have to even see outside of these things at all, how small their capacity for adaptability, flexibility, and change really is. It's about hearing this, really hearing it, and really understanding how pointless it is to try and get through to this person or to hope for something else to happen. Listen to what they say. You'll hear it. They're telling you the same thing over and over and over again. Nothing is going to change, and they will never see anything differently because they're actively resisting, fighting, and defeating every single way that change could possibly happen, and they will continue to do so. Hear this and believe it because it's the truth, and they really are saying it the entire time if you listen. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. And if you're interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support emails, and weekly support meetings, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and today I wanted to talk to you about pathological narcissism and the tragedy of perception. Before we get started, there are a few important notes I want to make. Number one, narcissism is a spectrum, and narcissists are people, so not everyone has exactly the same behaviors or experiences. It's about patterns and mindsets. Number two, a personality disorder is a diagnosis. A narcissist is a type of person, one who has rigid and toxic narcissistic traits. Number three, if you recognize some of these things in yourself that we're going to talk about, remember that there's a world of difference between displaying narcissistic behavior and being a narcissist. Number four, this channel has at least one video about each of the topics covered here if you need more information. When the Apostle Paul stated that we as people see through a glass darkly, he was saying that we have an incomplete and egocentric view of reality. He was saying that what we see reflected to us about ourselves and the world through the mirror of our perception is not always accurate. There is no type of person who lends more credibility to this statement than a pathologically narcissistic person. The truth is, we all have our biases. We all have our frames of reference. We all have our experiences. We all have our perception. Narcissistic people are not different in that regard. Where they often differ is in how strongly they hold these biases and how their perceptions are processed. This might not seem like a big deal. After all, everybody sees things a little differently, right? However, we must have a baseline to start from. If 4 people see a ball and 1 person sees a tomato, there can be no conversation about the ball or how it got there because not everyone even agrees that there is one. When perceptions cannot be agreed upon, there is dysfunction and disagreement. If perceptions are widely divergent, there's a lot of dysfunction and a lot of disagreement. When perceptions are so totally different that there can be no agreement at all on anything, communication is now no longer possible. There must be a place to start from, an agreed upon idea or focus of the interaction. If this is not present, there can be no healthy or productive interaction at all. Because of the affected perception of pathologically narcissistic people, there can be no agreed upon focus or baseline for communication. In many ways, this affected perception is the wellspring of all of the difficulties that are notorious for affecting relationships with this kind of person. It isn't you say tomato, I say tomato. It's you say tomato, I say basketball. The perception of the narcissistic person is so colored by their perceived experiences and emotions that it can come across as paranoid, eccentric, or even delusional. People are at a loss to understand how the narcissistic person has come to the conclusion or the idea that they are now espousing, and when they're asked, it's often very difficult for the narcissistic person to explain their thinking. If they can explain, the leaps in logic are often astounding and senseless, leaving people with the idea that they're dealing with someone who is profoundly mentally ill, grotesquely immature, woefully mistaken, or perhaps simply lying. Maybe it's one or the other. Maybe it's all of these things. Maybe it's none of these things. The pathologically narcissistic person's relationship with the truth and consequently, or perhaps in tandem, with reality is tentative at best. For the narcissistic person, feelings are facts. They are evidence of reality. If someone says something that hurts them, it becomes a fact and therefore their reality that this person said it to hurt them and for no other reason. The proof of this fact is their feelings. Because they have, quote, proof, no other explanation or reason will be accepted. It's the same way with everything. This is a backward way of processing information where they fit the facts to their feelings rather than fitting their feelings to the facts. It is essentially saying, this is true because I think it is. The proof of its truth is that I think it, and if I think it, it must be true. This irrational circular logic cannot be argued with, mostly because it can't be disproven. How can you argue facts against a feeling? When dealing with narcissistic people, many times the feeling is the argument. It's the theory, the evidence, and the conclusion. Attempts to prove or disprove the facts surrounding their argument are often taken as gaslighting and manipulation. You can't prove that you weren't trying to hurt them or embarrass them or lie to them or cheat them or whatever because they are hurt. They are embarrassed. They feel lied to. They feel cheated, and on and on and on. To them, that's proof of your intention right there. The reasoning seems to be, if you did not intend for me to feel this way, I wouldn't. Whatever feeling has been triggered, anger, shame, jealousy, anything else is now calling the shots. And everything that is perceived now is seen through this defensive, suspicious, hurt, and slanted lens, and it looks bad. Because the feeling is the argument, they may feel that any assertion you make to the contrary is an attempt to talk them out of their feelings, deny the harm you've done, trick them into accepting something hurtful, or that you are dismissing their feelings. This feels like abuse and manipulation. Asserting or arguing the facts of the situation is threatening to narcissists because you're now invalidating their feelings, which is to say, you're invalidating them. Contradicting the actual facts of the situation feels to the narcissist as though you are contradicting, even attacking, their feelings. Consequently, you are attacking them. Because narcissistic people are so disconnected from themselves internally, they experience events differently than most other people do. They assume their thoughts and feelings are being caused by other people doing something, rather than being a result of internal conflict or problems. Now, this could be understandable, or it could even be true, but a lot of times it really makes no sense at all. And instead of at least considering that their conclusions could be illogical, they use their feelings as evidence to double down. No matter how gently you attempt to contradict this experience or assert reality, they experience this as you telling them that they're wrong. Worse, you're telling them that their feelings don't matter, and subsequently neither do they. These feelings trigger shame in the pathologically narcissistic person, and they seem to be experienced as abusive, dishonest, or punitive rather than as an honest attempt at communication. This causes them to dig their heels in even deeper, hold on even tighter, and essentially destroys the possibility of actual communication. It has now become about winning. And the stakes are much higher than just a conversation or an argument. Winning is now about validating themselves as a worthy person. This is the bane of their entire existence. Now, obviously, most people understand that feelings can be hurt on accident, or that their perception of a situation may not be the reality of the situation. Narcissistic people do not function this way. Because of their affected perception, they believe that everything which happens is about, to, for, and because of them. Therefore, there's no way they could be hurt on accident because everyone is always considering how things are affecting them. They're the most important person in the situation, so how could this not be true? More importantly, their feelings back up their conclusions. The fact that they are making a backwards assessment of the situation does not occur to them, and it wouldn't matter if it did. Emotional fireworks with narcissistic people almost always begin with whatever they are claiming the other person did to upset them. Anything they did even directly preceding the situation does not matter, is not mentioned, and will not be acknowledged. If they are physically violent and you threw them out, well, the problem is that you threw them out, or you caused the violence somehow. If they have been caught cheating because you saw it in their phone, the problem is that you were snooping through their phone. If they said something horrible to you and you said something back, the focus will be on what you said back. Often things will be presented in such a way as to make it appear that you have done these things for no reason. This is probably a sincere experience for most pathologically narcissistic people. They really don't think they've done anything wrong. They really do think they are a special case, or that they have special reasons, or that they're subject to special treatment. When you can justify anything, absolutely anything, in your mind, the way that narcissists can, you can essentially do whatever you like. They always have a reason or a scapegoat or an excuse. Always. The reason for this is due to a survival mechanism they use called mirroring. One of the biggest problems for these types of personalities is that they require the cooperation of other people to survive, but they've been unable to work out how to successfully achieve this. They require voluntary participation from others in order to function, yet they are unable to successfully maintain even basic relationships with these people they so desperately need. Even the smoothest, most manipulative narcissist on the face of the earth uses up the goodwill of other people eventually. No matter how enamored or spellbound or afraid or dependent somebody is, eventually most people get sick of the way they're being treated. This is disastrous for the narcissist. Many people think that narcissists don't care what other people think of them. This could not be farther from the truth. They, in fact, require other people's input before they can know what to think of themselves. Pathologically narcissistic people cannot create, sustain, or regulate their own self-worth or their own self-image. The inability to do this is devastating to the human personality structure, and it often results in suicidal behavior. Once again, narcissists are no different in this regard. However, to combat this inevitable crash, narcissists survive using a tactic called mirroring. We see this in very, very young children. Small children cannot create or maintain their own self-worth or self-image either. They require caretakers to do this for them through the process of mirroring. This is where the caretaker reflects their feelings and their concept of the child back to them like a mirror. If the caretaker consistently reflects positive feelings and a positive image of the child will create a good self-image and have a healthy sense of self-worth. If the caretaker consistently reflects negative feelings and a negative image, or if the reflection is very inconsistent, the child's self-image and self-worth will suffer greatly. Keep in mind, this doesn't necessarily reflect reality or refer to anything intentional. For example, if mom and dad work all the time, children might get the impression that they're not important, and this creates a problem with self-worth and self-image, even though it's not necessarily reality and is certainly not intentional. This is the same basic way that pathologically narcissistic people operate. They require the input of others in order to function the same way that small children require it. Because narcissists already have such pervasive issues with their self-worth and self-image, they cannot tolerate negative reflections from other people, whether they're real or not. In the idealization or honeymoon stage of a relationship, the narcissist believes the other person is perfect. This is largely because the other person believes they are perfect. Narcissistic people do not forgive, condone, or accept mistakes from anybody, including themselves. To the narcissist's skewed perception, if someone is not perfect, they have no value. This is why they always have a reason or a justification or an excuse or a scapegoat. It's not a real mistake. It's not a real failure. And if it is, it's not their fault. As a way to combat their damaged self-image and non-existent self-worth, the narcissist has created an optimum, if one-dimensional, version of themselves to present to the world that insists on judging them so harshly. It's all good qualities and no bad. They use this flexible false self to mirror back to other people what they seem to want. This is how they have learned to survive, through mirroring and mimicry. They have no true interest in other people as people and are simply trying to get their needs met the only way they know how. As they mirror the other person reflects back to them extremely positive regard that helps create and sustain self-worth. This awesome person thinks I'm awesome. That would make anybody feel good. However, the narcissist is a paranoid and suspicious person in general, and especially in any relationship of any kind. Other people have enormous power over narcissists in relationships because the narcissist is dependent on this person or these people for their survival. This causes narcissists to be defensive and suspicious. Not only do they usually believe everyone operates as they do, but as a maladaptive defense mechanism to combat their non-existent self-worth, they also believe they are the focus of everything and everyone is just waiting to take from them somehow. Or they may believe that everyone needs them somehow and they are the only ones who can help or fix things. At the same time, they fear the exposure of, quote, who they really are and the resulting loss of necessary relationships which will culminate in their needs not being met. And, whether conscious or unconscious, they also need someone to blame things on so they can remain perfect and therefore valuable. It's a complicated and unbalanced situation that usually does not last very long. Cracks in the narcissist facade start to show through, often very early in the relationship. In established relationships, this is often experienced as going back to their old ways, as in, Mom promised to butt out of my business and stop being so controlling, but here she is calling my landlord and making everything worse instead of just letting me do it myself. She's back to her old ways again after not even a month. In order to achieve the respect of the narcissist, which is really only admiration and envy, they must perceive you to be better than they are in some way or at something. However, the narcissistic person is so self-loathing that this admiration and envy curdles very quickly. Admiration becomes scorn and contempt. Envy becomes jealousy. The things that made the narcissist believe you were superior and therefore attractive now make them feel inferior and therefore ashamed. Because they perceive their emotions as coming from outside sources, they assert that you are doing things to cause them to feel that way. This is perceived as an attack, and it will be treated as one. The worse the narcissist perceives that you are making them feel, the worse you will be treated. The more you deny these intentions, the less they will believe you. Part of the reason for this ongoing competitive one-upmanship perception is that narcissists often cannot manufacture anything of their own. They can't be right unless someone else is wrong. They can't win unless somebody else loses. Their entire life is a play they are putting on for an audience of one, themselves. Other people are simply props used to make the fiction more believable to themselves. If other people think I'm good, then I'm good. If other people are bad, then I am good by comparison. If others are wrong, then I am right by comparison. If the other person has lost, then I have won. If others are to blame, then I am not. Mirroring is the reason we often find that superficial relationships are more important to the narcissist than relationships with family or people who know them really well. The reflection they perceive from those who know them is not perfect. In fact, a lot of times it's awful. But those who do not know the narcissist have not been tainted with knowledge of the narcissist's abusive, reckless, or uncaring behavior. They are pure in that sense, and the image they mirror back to the narcissist reflects that. This can be why triangulation and compartmentalization happen. The narcissist does not want this, quote, pure supply of positive regard for them to be tainted by those who know them. They will often go to great lengths to keep people in their lives apart for this very reason. If someone's opinion of them changes, or they simply perceive a loss in that pure supply from somebody, they will often go on to reveal their pathological fear of exposure by accusing other people of ruining the relationship or going behind their back to tell the person things about them, even when this is completely illogical or makes no sense at all, such as in a situation where the people involved don't even know each other. This is one of the most destructive things about narcissistic relationships of any kind, and one of the reasons they are doomed to failure. The narcissist must maintain their flawless self-image at all costs. Of course, this is impossible. Nobody's perfect, everybody makes mistakes, but in the narcissist's unrealistic perception, this is not acceptable. Beyond not acceptable, in fact. The waves of shame it causes are intolerable and even life-threatening. But though reality can be interpreted and lied about, it cannot be erased. There are times when someone simply must be to blame for something. There are failures which cannot go unanswered. There are mistakes which cannot go unpunished. In these situations, the narcissist needs a scapegoat. Now their perfect partner is not so perfect anymore. Somebody can't be perfect and reflect perfect positive regard for the narcissist while also being to blame for everything. This is where the relationship falls apart. Usually on both sides, because what the narcissist is expecting from their partner is not possible. Narcissists have enormous difficulty resolving conflicting information about one object. Something is either black or it's white. It's either good or it's bad. It's either perfect and valuable or flawed and therefore worthless. No gray area, no in between. Most of us understand that everyone has positive and negative qualities. We can adjust to this and we can accept that no one is perfect. Narcissists have immense difficulty with this, not because they believe that less than perfect is worthless. This difficulty is part of the reason they believe that, in fact. You're either one or the other. But because the actual processing of these contradictory things is exceedingly difficult for them. To try and process these things, for example, that a perfect object has made a mistake, causes them extreme distress. They cannot make sense of the situation emotionally, and it results in something called splitting. Splitting is when the mind creates two categories or two images for one thing, instead of being able to reconcile all of the object's characteristics into a total understanding of it. Rather than a complete and balanced picture of something or somebody, there is a, quote, good image of the object and a separate, quote, bad one. This is something that happens in babies and very small children because they don't have the capacity to work this out for themselves in a way that they can understand. For whatever reason, whether it's abuse, neglect, indulgence, or some other combination of factors, the pathological narcissist development has been arrested and they are unable to do this either. This is why they accuse people of lying to them, misleading them, or betraying them just for not being perfect. Splitting causes serious issues in relationships with narcissistic people and is part and parcel to the idealization devaluation cycle so many people find themselves stuck in. A person cannot be perfect if they are also to blame for things. Someone who is not perfect has no value. Someone who has no value does not matter. They're not important. And this is how they will be treated. Until they try to leave, of course, and that's when the narcissist suddenly realizes that they're necessary, whether they're valuable or not, and attempts to re-secure the situation. We call this attempt to suck people back into the relationship hoovering, and it happens because the narcissist is suddenly faced with the loss of a necessary situation and their self-worth bottoms out. A bad reflection is better than no reflection, and they will do whatever they can to get things back to the way they were. Hoovering is about the narcissist's attempts to control their resources. It's a survival mechanism necessitated by being unable to provide for their needs themselves. It's panic mode. Because people are necessary for the survival of pathologically narcissistic persons, they are essentially resources. Narcissists have severe anxiety in this area because of their deep-seated insecurity regarding their needs being met. They rely on other people to do this for them the way that children do, and controlling people in situations is the way that they try to ensure that these resources are secure and their needs will be met. When they are unable to do this, their anxiety can explode into hysteria, rage, violence, cold silence, or simply fleeing the situation because they can't deal with the overwhelming feelings of insecurity and helplessness that come from not being able to control other people, their resources. All of the manipulation, abuse, and controlling behavior from narcissistic people is an attempt to secure resources from someone who is in survival mode. Survival mode is the narcissistic person's daily experience, even though they may not appear to be in a survival situation. It is likely for this reason that they seem unable to display empathy in situations where they perceive themselves as being threatened or believe they have something to lose. The new theory in the mainstream medical community is that many narcissistic people do indeed have empathy, and listeners of this show know that that has been maintained here on this channel for years. Many narcissistic people obviously have empathy in some situations, and narcissism is a spectrum, so the percentage of the people considered narcissists who may also display genuine empathy varies. The key in most situations seems to be whether they feel that empathy will be detrimental to their survival or not. In a survival situation, empathy may not be able to be a part of the equation because caring too much about the plight of others could result in detrimental consequences for yourself. In a survival situation, trusting others, believing them, or caring about them could result in yourself getting hurt. And if there's one thing the narcissistic person tries to avoid, it's hurt. They are concerned only with now and are unable to see or care that the behavior they're engaging in now could cause them hurt later. Doesn't matter. What matters now is feeling better now. Tomorrow we'll be worried about tomorrow when it gets here. When you're in survival mode, you take it one day at a time. And today they are angry or sad or scared or anxious or lonely or whatever they are, and they must do something about that immediately, as those feelings are dangerous to narcissists. They are threatening. They are intolerable. The overwhelming majority of the behavior of narcissistic people is designed to manage their internal emotional landscape in some way. But the people around them may never realize the enormous amount of emotional difficulty pathologically narcissistic people are having because so many of them are so good at hiding it. They're so good at hiding it and so disconnected from their emotions, in fact, that many narcissists don't realize this either. They simply act, or rather react, to their emotional state, many times without ever even acknowledging the emotional state. To put it simply, fear often cancels out empathy. Self-preservation often cancels out empathy. Survival often cancels out empathy. This facet of the human condition is explored, for example, on post-apocalyptic television shows such as The Walking Dead. The characters are in a survival situation, therefore they are in survival mode, and they must make choices between empathy and self-preservation. between their desire to help, trust, or care versus their need to survive and their fear of the people who might harm them who are in the same situation. They want to trust, but they can't because doing so is dangerous. After too long of being in this situation and its accompanying mindset, most people, even adult people who previously did not possess any significantly toxic narcissistic personality traits, can eventually lose the desire and even the ability to trust or empathize, instead perceiving everything and everyone as either resources to be exploited or threats to be neutralized because survival has reduced everything to this one basic equation. Sound familiar? This is probably why many narcissistic people do seem able to display empathy when confronted with situations they're not personally involved in or in situations where they perceive no threat. They will not lose anything by identifying with the other person or the other people, so to do so is safe. For example, a narcissistic person may be able to feel empathy for people involved in a bus accident that they saw on the news. Or a narcissistic doctor may feel empathy for their patients because the patients are no threat to their authority and are therefore safe. We see this with narcissistic parents as well, when the children are too young to challenge their authority or reject them by becoming individuals. Now, some of this is undoubtedly image maintenance, but some of it does appear to be genuine. It's easy, though, for them to have positive regard for people and for things who do not or cannot challenge, judge, or abandon them. This is underscored by the fact that if they are challenged somehow, or if they do become involved personally, their perception of the person or the situation often changes dramatically. Empathy is no longer safe to offer, and so it isn't. It's canceled out by the fear, rage, shame, defensiveness, and other emotions triggered by their perception of this previously safe person or situation viciously and unfairly turning against them. If you examine your interactions with narcissistic people, and really their interactions with everybody, you will notice this same pattern of behavior repeating itself over and over again. And of course, some of them really don't have any empathy at all. And what we generally find is the farther down the narcissistic spectrum somebody is, the less empathy they're going to have. The pathologically narcissistic person's relationship with the world around them is complicated and confusing, both for them and for others who are in their lives. Everything is colored by their skewed, immature, and emotionally charged perception, and because of that, their relationships are unstable and volatile, including their relationship with themselves. As with any other person on the planet, their relationships with others are reflections of their relationship with themselves. For example, something often overlooked about narcissists is that they don't just engage in splitting with other people. They also split about themselves, and for the same reason. The same good and bad image they hold of others, they have of themselves, hence the false self. The same effort they will expend to hide malicious, abusive behavior or horrific betrayal is often put toward hiding silly, stupid things that nobody would care about, such as making a small mistake. And it's done for the same reason, hence their inability to take accountability for anything, no matter how insignificant it is. The way they treat other people is indicative of their unacknowledged feelings for themselves, which is why they are often so desperate to prove that this is not true. When you're dealing with a pathologically narcissistic person, the most important thing to remember is that they literally do not see things the way that you do. If someone is truly a narcissist, their perception is extremely skewed. Their perception is colored by emotions they cannot regulate or understand. Some of them they don't even acknowledge. Dysfunctional coping mechanisms that have become pathological thought processes and knee-jerk reactions, as well as deep-seated beliefs that are often extremely illogical. Perhaps most importantly, many of them do not even know that these things are true. This is why seeking help for this problem is fraught with serious issues if it even happens. Aside from the fact that they trust nobody enough, including themselves, for a narcissist to get help with these things requires them, at minimum, to be able to use insight, which they don't have, to engage in successful reality testing, which they can't do. It requires them to use their fundamentally flawed perception and corrupt thinking processes to examine this fundamentally flawed perception and these corrupt thinking processes so they can identify and correct the flaws in this perception and these thinking processes. For all intents and purposes, this is just not possible. It's using a computer program contaminated by viruses to find the other viruses in the computer. It doesn't work because the program itself is contaminated. This perception evolved during childhood in an effort to keep the narcissist safe and has now become a pathological process that keeps them stuck in the idea that they are not safe, ever. All facets of the pathologically narcissistic person, when examined, come back to this one thing. Any efforts to convince them that this is not true are experienced as manipulation, because why would you want to tell me that I'm safe here with you when clearly I'm not? My feelings prove that I'm not. But they are not safe anywhere, and it's because they cannot even trust themselves, their feelings, or their own perception, much less their ability to fulfill their own needs and care for themselves. Sadly, their dysfunction has evolved in such a way as to, quote, protect them from exactly what they need to understand in order to make things better. It's a tragic situation in so many ways, but you can't fix it. There's nothing to fix. This is what they are. This is what it is. The, quote, bad side of the narcissist is part of that, just like the, quote, good side is. These things cannot be separated. It might seem like two different people or two different personalities, but it's not. Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde. The good news is, for those who recognize this behavior in themselves, there is hope. Whether you are narcissistic or a victim who is displaying narcissistic behavior because you learn to be in defense mode all the time, you can change these things. You can learn to trust yourself, meet your own needs, deal with your emotions in a healthy way, and use reality testing to manage your perceptions and conclusions. It's not easy, but it's possible, and it is so worth it. It's up to you. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, through email, and via Skype. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can do that by visiting littleshaman.org and clicking the Book and Appointment tab. I teach workshops a few times a month, so if you're interested in attending one of those, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.